Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 11th annual Bloomberg CityLab. What a great start to the morning. Let's give another round of applause to the Expanded Memory Dance Project. It's a little hard to follow that, but I will do my best, okay? We are thrilled to be here in Mexico, where Bloomberg Philanthropies has been working for more than a decade on issues ranging from public health to supporting the arts, partnering with cities, and protecting our environment. And our latest win came early this month when the Mexican government created the largest marine park in the Gulf of Mexico, and we're so proud to have played a role. It's great to have a win at the national level, but at Bloomberg Philanthropies, we're also big believers in what can get done at the local level. Whether you're improving transit options, creating more affordable housing, or making neighborhoods safer, everyone here is doing essential work, and we know just how meaningful that work can be. That's true for Mike Bloomberg, who served 3 terms as mayor of New York City, for me, joining him at City Hall, and for many others on the Bloomberg Philanthropies team who also worked in local government. And that includes a member of our board of directors and the former mayor of Miami, Manny Diaz, who is here with us today. At Bloomberg Philanthropies, we put cities at the heart of so much of our work because we've seen how cities can be incredible laboratories for innovation. They can act more nimbly than national governments, and local leaders are directly accountable for solving so many of the challenges that are impacting our lives. Cities are also continuing to grow rapidly. More than 56% of the world's population now lives in urban areas, which means mayors and their teams really need to deliver more and better services than ever before. And that's an unprecedented opportunity to improve millions, even billions of lives, and Bloomberg CityLab is all about helping leaders seize that opportunity. The good news is that everyone in this room and cities worldwide have a lot to learn from one another. Despite their differences, cities often face similar issues, and they can benefit from many of the same solutions. During the Bloomberg years at City Hall in New York, our team was never shy about stealing ideas from others. When we created our 311 system, giving New Yorkers one single number to call for city services and information, we drew on pioneering efforts in Baltimore and other cities. Our bus rapid transit system, which made key routes and more efficient, came from a great example that Bogota was setting. And I remember traveling to Paris to meet with the mayor about the city's successful bike share program, inspiring our own network. Those ideas came from other cities, but we made them our own, and they've had an extraordinary impact. For example, over the last 20 years, New Yorkers have reached out to 311 more than 500 million times. And we're proud to say that other cities borrowed ideas from us too. Let me give you a couple of examples. First, our smoking ban. Before Mike was elected mayor, many of the city's bars and restaurants and other workplaces were full of cigarette smoke, which created terrible health risks for workers and for customers. The smoking ban we passed in 2002 changed that, and it was a huge reason why, by the time we left office, New Yorkers' life expectancy increased by 3 full years. We can clap. The work we did and the data we collected gave other leaders a model for addressing the harms of tobacco in their own cities. We saw a huge wave of governments follow our lead, and now our team at Bloomberg Philanthropies continues to oversee a global tobacco program focused on making more progress. And today, I'm glad to say, these smoke-free laws cover some 4 billion people in 85 countries, including here in Mexico. A second example is Plan YC, our landmark plan for cutting New York's carbon footprint and fighting climate change. Driven by projections that the city would gain 1 million residents by 2030, we created a roadmap to prepare and put environmental sustainability at its core. We laid out more than 120 ambitious projects and policies, like planting 1 million new trees, cleaning up brownfields, expanding access to public transit, and improving buildings' energy efficiency. And those innovations helped cut carbon emissions by 13% in just 6 years, while creating the cleanest city air in more than half a century. And it sparked other cities globally to embrace their own in tackling climate change. The concept that cities can learn from one another may sound like simple common sense, but in practice, it doesn't happen often enough or fast enough. It's not always clear where cities go to learn from one another and what they're doing, or how they can adapt to the work for themselves. That's why we make spreading successful ideas a priority for our work at the Foundation. We've created networks like the Partnership for Healthy Cities, a group of more than 70 global cities sharing and implementing policies for improving public health. We've helped cities create programs that cut emissions, improve our air quality, and fight climate change, like through the C40 cities. And as you'll hear more about tomorrow, we've led a global ideas competition called the Mayor's Challenge that identifies some of the best and boldest solutions to city issues and helps them spread. At last year's CityLab at Washington, D.C., we built on all that work by launching the Bloomberg Cities Idea Exchange to give city leaders the blueprints, the case studies, and technical assistance to understand proven ideas and adapt them to their own cities. Today, I'm pleased to highlight an initial set of powerful ideas which Bloomberg Philanthropies will help cities implement. These 11 ideas address a wide variety of challenges and are backed by exciting results, and they all have the potential to make a great impact. They include ideas that tackle air pollution with data from low-cost air sensors, cut emissions by retrofitting older public buildings, serve more sustainable school lunches by supplying local produce, prevent corruption by digitizing permits and building business licenses, improve economic outcomes by providing food vendors with solar-powered refrigeration, tackle student learning loss through summer school programs, respond to community crises by matching residents in need with neighbors who can help, reduce homelessness by repurposing shipping containers for temporary shelters, prevent traffic deaths by establishing strong city speed limits, improve waste management in partnership with informal waste collectors, and finally, an all-time Bloomberg favorite, bolster public health by implementing smoke-free laws. We believe in each of these ideas, and we want to help city leaders replicate the programs. So please check out our website at bloomberg.org. We're also interested in learning about new ideas that can have the potential to spread. So get in touch with us, and perhaps they'll end up in a future round of Bloomberg Cities on the Ideas Exchange. We really can't wait to work together and put great ideas on steroids globally. Speaking of great ideas and working together, it's now my pleasure to introduce a terrific partner of Bloomberg Philanthropies and a leader who is no stranger to great ideas. As mayor of Itapulapu, she established the Utopias, an incredible community centers featuring colorful parks, sports facilities, and cultural and educational activities. She invested in public amenities, including 13 Olympic-sized swimming pools, seemingly overnight. She brightened her city with nearly 7,000 murals and brought extraordinary cable car line to the skies, the longest in Latin America, among many other major achievements, which I'm not going to list today. On October 5th, she became the new mayor of Mexico City with ambitions to take these and other accomplishments citywide. On behalf of Bloomberg Philanthropies, I want to thank her for her partnership, including our newest work together to tackle air pollution, which we're launching today. And from everyone here at Bloomberg CityLab, we're so grateful for welcoming us to her city and for sharing her thoughts and perspectives. Please welcome the Mayor of Mexico City, Clara Brugada.
Hola, amigas y amigos. Primeramente quiero darles la bienvenida a esta hermosa Ciudad de México. Realmente para nosotros es un honor que esta gran organización pueda llevar a cabo esta edición más de CityLab aquí en la Ciudad de México. Quiero saludar a los organizadores. Un aplauso a Patty Harris, a James Anderson, a todo el equipo de Bloomberg. Así que un fuerte aplauso. Y quiero saludar en especial a los alcaldes y alcaldesas del mundo que hoy se citan aquí en la Ciudad de México, en este lugar, a los urbanistas, a los académicos, a los especialistas en el tema de ciudades. Y pues felicito realmente la realización de este encuentro. Este encuentro tiene el objetivo justamente de lograr un intercambio de experiencias, de innovaciones, de proyectos, de derechos, de lo que requieren nuestras ciudades a lo largo y ancho del mundo para hacerlas más habitables, justas, innovadoras, resilientes y sustentables. Porque a final de cuentas las ciudades desde sus orígenes han buscado la comunidad, han buscado lograr una mejor comunidad y espacios civilizatorios. Así que los que gobernamos las grandes ciudades en el mundo tenemos esta gran tarea y responsabilidad. Así que, de mi parte, bienvenidas y bienvenidos a la Ciudad de México. Quiero comentarles que en este país, en nuestro país, estamos viviendo momentos históricos, porque recientemente este gran pueblo eligió a la primera mujer presidenta del país, a Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo. Y para nosotros es de vital importancia. Decimos que es tiempo de mujeres en este país y en el mundo. Así que tenemos grandes tareas por hacer y ha marcado un hito en la historia de México, 200 años de república y por primera vez una mujer gobierna este país. Y esto significa una ruta sin retorno para lograr la igualdad plena. Y miren ustedes que esta gran ciudad es una ciudad con más de 9 millones de habitantes y que cuando hablamos de ciudad metropolitana estamos hablando de 22 millones de habitantes. Vivimos en un país que tiene 128 millones de habitantes y el 10% vivimos pues en estos lugares. Somos la principal economía del país y nuestra ciudad genera el mayor Producto Interno Bruto de todas las ciudades del país. Somos la entidad federativa con el mayor nivel de desarrollo en ciencia y tecnología. Y el 50% de investigación científica de México se lleva a cabo aquí, en la Ciudad de México. Y esta ciudad se ha convertido en la ciudad capital de la transformación. Es una ciudad global, cosmopolita y diversa. Es una ciudad de bienestar, de derechos, de libertades y con una gran economía. Nuestra ciudad, como muchas ciudades del mundo, no tiene fronteras y por lo tanto las respuestas que tenemos que dar las ciudades no se circunscriben estrictamente a las fronteras administrativas. Así que el segundo capítulo de la transformación de la Ciudad de México implica una gobernanza democrática metropolitana. Es decir, no podemos pensar en temas como el aire, problemáticas como el agua, la seguridad, sin tener una visión metropolitana. Y por eso pensamos que este nuevo capítulo de la Ciudad de México pues tiene que tener como prioridad soluciones a zonas en las que compartimos los territorios, la problemática y que esperan soluciones metropolitanas. Tiene 10 días que asumí el gobierno de la Ciudad de México, así que pues me da mucho gusto recibirlos, recibirlas. Recibí también una ciudad con muchos avances transformadores. Logramos que en esta ciudad se hiciera la inversión pública más importante en movilidad sustentable en la historia de la ciudad. Se creó una amplia red de bienestar social con programas sociales y también se desarrolló una política pública enfocada a la innovación tecnológica para hacer más eficiente este gobierno. Se construyeron 300 espacios comunitarios donde la población accede al derecho al deporte, a la cultura, a la ciencia y a la tecnología, y se crearon escuelas de nivel medio superior y nuevas universidades que hoy albergan a más de 50,000 estudiantes que antes no tenían en dónde estudiar. Así que, sí, nuestra tarea es construir, como le llamamos aquí, el segundo piso de la transformación de esta gran Ciudad de México. Y este nuevo gobierno que estamos empezando, desde mi perspectiva, una de sus prioridades más importantes es la igualdad de género. Así que estamos construyendo con las mujeres un gran plan de igualdad sustantiva para la Ciudad de México. Porque cuando hablamos de que es tiempo de mujeres, no nos referimos solo a la representación política que cada vez más tenemos que ir ganando, sino tiempo de mujeres para mí significa es tiempo de hacer justicia a las mujeres. Y eso significa políticas públicas que pongan en el centro el combate a las grandes desigualdades de género que tenemos. Así que uno de los ejes fundamentales que llevaremos a cabo en la ciudad es la creación del sistema público de cuidados de la Ciudad de México. Esto es muy importante porque es una nueva manera de repensar las ciudades, de que los urbanistas tomen en cuenta la problemática que significa las tareas de los cuidados, que deje de ser una tarea solamente privada y se convierta en infraestructura y recursos públicos para que las ciudades puedan tener acceso a grandes infraestructuras donde se cuiden a las niñas y a los niños. Así que vamos a crear una potente infraestructura que contenga, por ejemplo, más de 200 centros de cuidado y desarrollo infantil en esta Ciudad de México, pero además casas de día para los adultos mayores, centros de rehabilitación para personas con discapacidad, centros donde se pueda atender la problemática cotidiana, como lavanderías, comedores, espacios de relajación, es decir, lo que antes, que era hacer de comer, lavar la ropa y destinar horas y horas a las tareas del cuidado, se convierte en una responsabilidad pública, en un derecho de esta ciudad y en una obligación del gobierno, porque hoy tenemos el derecho constitucional en la Ciudad de México de implementar el sistema público de cuidados. Otro de los grandes temas es el tema de seguridad. Miren, en esta ciudad se logró disminuir casi el 60% de delitos de alto impacto. Este segundo piso de construcción, ¿qué significa? Construir territorios de paz e igualdad. Eso significa profundizar modelos de seguridad cercanos, de proximidad territorial a la gente. Esto significa continuar con un modelo que ha dado resultados, que es atender las causas y prepararnos tecnológicamente en esta ciudad para enfrentar al crimen o a todavía situaciones que no queremos que existan en cuanto a violencia. Así que estamos preparados para hacer de la Ciudad de México la ciudad más segura, construyendo paz e igualdad en los territorios de esta gran ciudad. Y también uno de los grandes temas es la movilidad. El 78% de los habitantes de esta ciudad se mueven en transporte público. Así que todos nuestros recursos tienen que estar destinados a la creación, al fortalecimiento, a continuar con los grandes temas de movilidad sustentable. Así que vamos a continuar construyendo lo que le llamamos acá cablebuses, que son teleféricos, que sirven para el transporte de las personas que viven en las partes altas de la ciudad. 5 líneas de cablebús o teleférico vamos a construir en los próximos meses en la Ciudad de México. Y además vamos a seguir invirtiendo como política de Estado en la electromovilidad. Queremos que la Ciudad de México tenga su principal fuerza de movilidad sustentable. Así que continuaremos con la electromovilidad, continuaremos construyendo infraestructura accesible, sustentable y que disminuya el tiempo. Queremos que en esta ciudad la población pueda disfrutar a su familia en lugar de pasarla horas y horas transportándose. Así que uno de los mayores recursos va a ser invertido en la movilidad sustentable para la Ciudad de México. Además de que vamos a convertirnos en la ciudad con más infraestructura para ciclovías de todo el país y, por supuesto, calles peatonales y primero el peatón y primero la movilidad no motorizada en esta gran ciudad. También el espacio público. El día de hoy, muchos de ustedes van a ir a conocer espacios públicos innovadores en la Ciudad de México. Unos de ellos son las utopías, así como se oye, utopías. Esta ciudad plantea un gran proyecto de transformación del espacio público. Yo fui gobernante de la alcaldía más poblada de la ciudad, llamada Iztapalapa, y allí desarrollamos un proyecto transformador del espacio público llamado Utopías. ¿Qué son las utopías? Bueno, además que son los sueños y las metas. Este proyecto consiste en hacer realidad esas utopías y sueños de transformación del espacio público. Consiste en grandes proyectos transformadores que tienen infraestructura deportiva, recreativa, cultural, de bienestar y de los cuidados. Así que construiremos 100 hermosas utopías a lo largo y ancho de la ciudad. Las van a conocer hoy y me encantaría que hoy por la noche platicáramos qué les pareció. Pero ahí está condensado lo mejor del urbanismo social. No se trata de foros sociales ni centros deportivos, sino una visión integral, porque la sociedad es integral. Así que las utopías son irrupciones estéticas en las zonas donde hace falta transformaciones en esta ciudad. Así queremos, bajo la perspectiva de hacer ciudades de los 15 minutos, las utopías van a estar instaladas para que la población de esta ciudad en menos de 15 minutos pueda acceder a espacio público transformador. Las utopías, entonces, son la gran apuesta a la igualdad, a hacer justicia social y territorial en esta ciudad. Fíjense que yo vengo de zonas periféricas, así que hoy por hoy uno de los grandes objetivos que tenemos es que las periferias de la Ciudad de México no sean sinónimos de desigualdad y de abandono. Las periferias como las nuevas centralidades que permitan desarrollo, economía y crecimiento para nuestra población. Y también vamos a continuar con los grandes proyectos de innovación tecnológica. Aquí trabajamos en esta ciudad un gran proyecto de innovación con la agencia digital que se creó para tal efecto, logrando cambios fundamentales en la sociedad. Así que queremos un gran gobierno digital, un gobierno abierto, un gobierno que promueva la conectividad, la modernidad y que la tecnología se democratice a lo largo y ancho de la ciudad. Y aquí en esta ciudad, como en muchas ciudades del mundo, no podemos hablar de sustentabilidad y de medio ambiente o de los temas que hemos mencionado sin tener una visión de futuro. Aquí tenemos que tener claridad que la preparación, el enfrentar las consecuencias del cambio climático obligan a que las ciudades tengamos programas medioambientales. Y uno de los temas fundamentales de la ciudad es el agua. Vamos a enfrentar el reto del agua bajo una perspectiva de modificar el modelo de gestión de agua de la ciudad. Y queremos aprovechar los millones de litros de agua que se pierden en el drenaje para destinarlos al gran reservorio que tenemos, que es el subsuelo, y lograr en 18 años el equilibrio hídrico en esta ciudad. Así que los 6 años que nos tocará gobernar esta ciudad, tendremos que trabajar intensamente para lograr equilibrio hídrico, para infiltrar el agua al subsuelo, para defender el bosque de agua y para lograr lo más importante, que el agua se vea como un derecho humano y no como una mercancía, que el agua implique la defensa de un derecho de la naturaleza en su modelo de gestión. Así que esta es una de las tareas más importantes y se tiene que ver con perspectiva metropolitana. Así que el tema de agua tiene que hablarnos de sustentabilidad y de futuro. Lo mismo cualquier otro tema como es el reciclado de los desechos. 13,000 toneladas diarias de desechos se producen en esta ciudad. Y en 6 años nos proponemos reciclar la mitad de todos los desechos de la Ciudad de México. Esto es muy importante, son palabras mayores. Tenemos la metodología, que son grandes plantas recicladoras y transformadoras. Así que esto es uno de los temas más importantes para lograr la canasta de servicios ambientales de esta ciudad, como es mejor aire, más agua, menos ruido y la electromovilidad. Estos son algunos de los temas más importantes que estamos trabajando y por supuesto que a nivel de la economía queremos que esta ciudad siga siendo una ciudad próspera, una ciudad con prosperidad compartida, una ciudad en la que generar ingresos signifique también responsabilidad medioambiental, una ciudad en la que vemos que el mejor programa social es el empleo, es que la población tenga un empleo bien remunerado, una ciudad en la que transformemos su economía con nuevos ejes rectores, en donde podamos lograr libertad suficiente para el desarrollo, el crecimiento, la inversión económica en esta ciudad, pero también una ciudad de bienestar. Como decimos, por el bien de todos, primero los pobres. Pero decimos además que dentro de los pobres, las mujeres, las pobres son las primeras. Así que concluyo esta intervención dándoles la bienvenida, que conozcan, que nos conozcamos, que intercambiemos experiencias y que podamos tener un excelente encuentro. Saludo a Bloomberg, a todo el equipo y a todos los alcaldes y alcaldesas. Bienvenidos y bienvenidas a la Ciudad de México.
Próxima estación, Socorro.
Good morning. Welcome to Mexico City, everyone. We're so happy and proud to have you and to host you. I cannot be but thankful to Mayor Michael Bloomberg, to Patricia Harris, but especially to James Anderson for making this happen. I'm happy to be a part of this family. We have a fantastic, short, brief, but very intense panel with 3 amazing guests, Carina, Arvizu, Rodrigo, Rivero, Borrell, and Alejandro, Echeverri, who, although everyone was trained as an architect, each of us practiced in a different way the ways of engaging innovation and the ways of engaging the city. So we'll hear perspectives of how through the work in academia, in public policy, in private-public partnerships, as individual developers, how do we address the challenges of our cities? And to take the quote, which reminded me of Patricia's introduction of our very good friend from the Urban Age Project, Ricky Burdett and Wolfgang Novak used to say that cities have a grammar of success. To replicate that grammar is fundamental to expanding our knowledge about good ideas and how to avoid failures. So without further ado, I'll open the floor, and I'd like to start with a question of how, through your each different platforms, have you approached the question of addressing innovation and how the Latin American city experience can relate to other cities? Carina.
Thank you so much, Jose. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for this space. And it's really nice for me to be just after Mayor Brugada because it's the perfect segue. I think that Latin American cities, what they are really doing, and we have to share this to the world, it's doing urbanism through the lenses of gender, and specifically taking into account all the care activities. And we have these examples that Mayor Brugada just mentioned that were done in Iztapalapa, you'll see afterwards. But also we see other in Bogota, for instance, with the care of blocks. And really putting into account the value of care activities and unpaid work that, for instance, in Mexico, they represent 24% of the national GDP. Just imagine all this care work that it's been done mainly by women and that affects women the most because they have like a double labor, sometimes in informal work, sometimes in formal work. And you know that Latin America is the most unequal region in the world. And I do believe that through the lenses perspective in urbanism, we can really tackle inequality in all its dimensions, really putting the lenses to all the reproductive activities. And this is done easily with care infrastructures, bringing care facilities close to where people need them, to where people are living, but also connecting them with good public transportation. So probably if you have the opportunity to go to some pilares in the north of the city, you will see that the cable cars are connected to the pilares, but also through territorial planning and housing. So proximity and mixed land uses.
Thank you, Carina. Rodrigo, your perspective of almost 20 years practicing as someone who deals in impact investment and addressing the questions of housing through development.
Thank you, Jose, and thank you very much for this invitation. Yeah, at Reurbano, we've worked for 15 years trying to provide affordable or at least housing for people who live within the urban cores. We think that urban recycling is the better available resource for us to do environmental responsible investments in development, and through connecting different projects along a street or along a corridor, we make sure that we stay involved in neighborhoods for a longer period of time. We think of the neighborhoods and the communities as a strong, very relevant part of what we try to accomplish along our practice. And I think the real value or the real power lies in the collective action and in the actual capability that we have to trust each other and the means that we have to work together for a better outcome. I think we all have to take responsibility and we have to be co-responsible for what gets built in our cities. And I think providing those opportunities and managing different entities and being kind of like a middleman trying to put everything in the table to make things happen is what actually adds more value to the discussion. As an architect trained developer, my father was also an architect. My family lived in a rent-controlled building in Colonia Juarez. So I know what affordability means and how much it can be changed for families like mine. So I think it's in our hands to make sure that we end up producing well-designed, well-located, and affordability housing for the people that would thrive in cities like ours. So we're happy to be here and address this with you guys.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Alejandro, you've had the opportunity to practice from many different fields and positions, from public official to consultant, from professor at Tec de Monterrey to Medellin. What can you tell us about this sense of innovation from a different perspective?
Yes, Jose, thank you, and thank you for the invitation to this panel. I will share 3 conclusions related with the questions. And so in my experience in Medellin and with other cities and in Mexico too, so the challenge of continuity and sustainability. Continuity, I'm sorry, does not exist in Latin America. So it's a challenge. So after having working in many other cities and past 50, I realized that we had in Medellin at that time an exceptional moment. So first, some examples like that we have, like the Botanical Garden, the Explora Park, the Moravia Cultural Center in the North Zone, share these lessons that belongs to previous histories, even below the government arrived to the government. So exist in different form, from the communities, from the science centers, from the universities, so from some institutional capacity in the private sector. So these histories that the governments could take and could implement and elevate and support has this possibility to create a sustainable processes too. And the design from the beginning is really important. So if you include a more diverse and powerful and robust agenda of actors from the beginning in a creative way, that gives and became and create a different ecology for the sustainability, and is really important. And this partnership between public, private, and local initiatives are really important in relation to keep those processes going on and in a more an ecology that could expand with different initiatives. So the local capacity to empower and to increase the local capacity after some years is really clear that those processes and those places that has this solid base has a more capability of replicability. So I really believe in the school of to increase the local capacity more than the school of mayors, if I could say. and the last thing is, I think in this moment of uncertainty and doubt, I'm sorry, my English sometimes is we need institutions that we could believe. So the role of the universities, private and public, and private is really important. And I really strongly believe in the capacity of the universities to become and to keep the questions on the table and to lead ethics and to lead processes and became a really important actors in the and we are, and I have the privilege today to work with the Tech of Monterrey in this some initiatives that because this university and others has the idea that has to help and to improve the Mexican city. So the role of the universities, because this lack of belief in many different public institutions, that they are really important. So I think the government, the local governments has to, they have an important tool in the universities to explore different partnerships to improve the cities. Yeah.
Thank you, Alejandro. And to connect it to something that Clara says about kind of institutional redesign and how does the decisions we make impact the way citizens live the city, decide about the city. There's a kind of a common understanding that in Latin America, there's a combination of top-down and bottom-up. There's a dissolution of the public and the private notions of space. But there's even innovative ways of introducing the questions of affordability in housing. Maybe briefly you can talk a lot, even the questions of caring facilities and social infrastructure. Maybe briefly you can talk a little bit more about how from your different platform do you think other cities can learn from Latin America?
So in Latin America, regarding housing, there's been a lot of different experiences of urban upgrading. As you may know, we are the most urbanized region, and I think we can also share some experiences to Africa. And there's been like an evolution in all these approaches of urban upgrading, but lately, there's also been the gender lens through to tackle this. And I can mention an example in Argentina where the title deeds of the homes were given equally to men and women shared, just even if they were not legally married, for instance, like I'm talking about a heteronormative couple, but also these can empower women. And in Mexico, with the program, the social housing program at the federal level, we also did that. Most of the women were the beneficiaries of the program, having the titles of their homes. And these can really help reducing gender inequality and other inequalities, because in the framework of rights, I think the foremost right is right to care, to be cared, to take care, and for self-care. And that right can enable other rights. But housing, the right of adequate housing, it's the baseline also.
Okay, thank you, Carina. Brief ideas of
Yes, thank you. For the sake of the time, I think the power, again, lies in the collective capabilities that we have as developers, private institutions, financial institutions, government. We have to work together to make things happen. That's the only way, and when we come to the table with trust and transparency, it's much easier for us to make things happen. In terms of the cities, most of the people now in the world lives in cities, so I think we have to figure out how to build well-designed, well-located housing to actually tackle those challenges that we all face or you face as majors, as citizens, as developers, and I think there's a great opportunity for us to work together.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Alejandro.
Yes, I think in Latin America, in my experience, that you see that everything is in friction. No, you have all simultaneously the problems in a very specific condition, but together. You have the problems of risk management, the housing, the employment. So that context and reality force you to innovate. And it's an ideal space to innovate, not only for Latin American or Global South responses. It's to innovate in how you could manage those processes, how you articulate the knowledge of environment, the knowledge of infrastructure, the knowledge of process of participation. So this is an amazing opportunity, and we have a lot of interesting lessons. Some of them small, some of them became public policies. The challenge is the continuity, I must say. But this is an amazing space to innovate, and the creativity is really beautiful, yeah.
And to talk about continuity, and we need to move on, but we look forward to continuing the conversation in the multiple events of the day. I think the one big lesson this city has for the world is you'll be better off if you can elect 2 women mayors back to back. So with that, thank you. We look forward to seeing you.
Okay, so let's dive in into our conversation. Mayor Nirenberg, transit-oriented developments sound appealing. I mean, what's not to like? Affordable housing, transit hub. So instead of giving us the pitch on why these projects are great, we would like to hear a little bit on what challenges do you face with those, and how have you managed to overcome those challenges?
Sure. Well, I'll start by saying that the obvious challenge in Texas for transit in a city that has never had transit before is political opposition. There's been a culture of cars developed, and we've had opportunities in the past to develop transit in our community. So overcoming that political opposition is number one. Number two is that San Antonio is a major city, big city, 1.5 million in the municipality, but it's very spread out, not dense, and the lack of density doesn't typically support mass transit. And so overcoming the density issue to really ensure that the mass transit system is serving ridership that would allow it to be successful is another challenge. And then the last one I would say is that to start a transit system in a city of 540 square miles is significantly expensive, lots of resources. And so we had to develop a system that would help overcome the expense of ensuring that the mass transit system would be big enough to support a population, but also reduce the costs to allow us to build it in the first place.
Gentrification can be a side effect of these projects. How can you limit that impact?
Sure, and that's where overcoming these obstacles is very important. So on the first one, I would say that, number one, we have a moment in time with bipartisan legislation passed where we have resources to build at scale. That's very important. The costs are also part of the opposition in the past, so overcoming that challenge is very important. But the issue of gentrification is of huge concern. And so that's where our efforts to reform zoning and land use regulations is so critically important. And what we've had done is start a transit-oriented development process to oversee and to reform all of our land use codes in the corridors that are going to have that mass transit system. And I remind people, as we go through the community process, because involving community is critically important as we start to build out these plans, I remind people that at the intersection of transportation infrastructure, of housing, and of education is economic mobility, is our ability to fight poverty, to thrive as a community. And so ensuring that all of these systems are working together is our way that we can achieve success.
Washington, in Latin America and in many developing countries, we have this history of mistrust of the government. When they approach the communities with these projects that offer great solutions, there's this, because there's a long history of undelivered promises. Just in Rio, you have experience with Rio. I read a research note where the commute times of some favelas ended up increasing despite the big investments that there were around the Olympics on some of the most expensive projects of transportation for Brazil. How do you engage the community to win their trust and to put them in an open attitude for these projects where they are stakeholders but also supporters and promoters of it?
Yeah, thank you for that, Carlos. Yeah, it's a pressing issue, how to build trust during the process of urban development. Although I disagree a bit with your statement, because the Olympics were really important for the city of Rio. For the first time, we could achieve a network of mass transportation, allowing the city to connect different areas, different sectors. Historically, that was also a problem for the city. The city had 2 mountains and very complex sites, and also it was really important in changing the downtown area. So Olympics allowed the city to have a better infrastructure for transportation. During my time as the former head of the planning department in the city, and doing this special plan for the downtown area to fight against the vacant consequence of the pandemic, I decided to move to downtown. So I rent an apartment and I moved to there. It was a really important experience, expose myself as a bureaucrat to that local community, and also facing the things they face every day in the daily basis. So I could understand how that place worked, but also the pains of the daily life of that community, not having a good public service and also a private service. And I did that also when I did the master plan for Rio, also moving to the farthest neighborhood in the city. And it was, once again, really important when you realize that people have to wake up 3:30 a.m. in the morning to be at the train station at 4 a.m. So you understand how this transit and the house allocation is really important. What we did in Rio at that time was really changing the urban regulation for the downtown area. Carlos, the future historians, they are going to look for the period from the Spanish flu to the pandemic, to the COVID pandemic, and they will say, what the heck these guys did with their cities during the period. So we start to adopt this functional zoning. When you look to cities at the end of the 19th century, cities were much more mixed. People live in the up floors, in the market. We have this intense mix of use. And then we start to adopt this functional zoning. We start to telling people we should live there, we should work there, and we should commute, like a really smart decision. So that was the dumbest decision that we did for cities in that time. So we should find a way to move housing to where we already have transportation. That's the case of Rio's downtown. We are a 5-minute city in Rio's downtown, but we don't have people living there.
One of the challenges around irregular settlements is to attract, to reward people for approaching regulation, for adapting to some of these rules and zoning rules that you are saying. In Brazil, in the favelas, they're experimenting with the community land trust. What can you tell us about this? Can this be a scalable solution that can be repeated in other cities, even in other continents?
Yeah, achieving property title is highly complex, also expensive for a city, in the city government, and also institutionally very complex. And in the new master plan of Rio, we decide to create for the second city in Brazil with this urban instrument, which is the community land trust. And it's a way to facilitate it, to have a fast process of land recognition in the community base. We should look to informal areas as a community effort to stay closer of opportunities. So we should also recognize that land tenure in the same process.
Mayor, I don't want to finish this conversation without touching on another big challenge that we hear, and it's a common denominator. It doesn't matter if it is about regulation via titles or a transportation hub, but whenever the concept of affordable housing comes in, there's this mentality of not in my backyard. Yeah. How do you deal with that? How, in a polarized world of politics, but also in social media being used as battlefield to oppose and resist to some of these projects that people say they love it, as long as it's not in my backyard. How do you face that?
I think the first thing is to anticipate that it will be there. Even if you believe that the progressive policy of transportation and mass transit is going to move your city forward, anticipate that there will be change and there will be resistance to that change. So involving community in the plans for land use and development for us was priority number one. And so we are now embarked on a strategic housing plan. We're about year 4 that ties land use to our transportation planning through a comprehensive map of the city. That map, I can go to those neighborhoods that give us pushback and say, this is the plan that you developed. Now, we do have some challenges with older neighborhoods that want to retain their historic character, and we can work with that. We can adjust for that. But the most important thing in developing these kinds of transformative models is to make sure that the community knows that they owned the process from the beginning.
We have 1 minute left, Washington. Going back to the concept of gentrification, there's also, even though it's always seen in a negative light, there's also a positive aspect. To some degree, it also means some progress for some particular areas. How do you define that limit, that line, where it's progress, but it's not really pushing out that cultural aspect that the mayor mentions?
Yeah. It's I believe it's much better to deal with the problems of urban vitality than the problems of urban death. So, in that sense, gentrification, it's also a problem, but we should be obsessed by increasing the housing supply. And we should use all the tools that we have to do that. What we are doing now in Inter-American Development Bank, in the CityLab, it's how to offer better data to measure and map informality in the region, in the Latin America and the Caribbean. We have 14% of the population live in formal settlements there. And also offering solutions to increase the quality of the co-creation of the population and cities in their cities, to really taking part also in the process of designing policies to increase housing supply.
Well, with that note, with becoming obsessed with increasing the supply of housing, I thank our panelists, and especially for your insights, and thanks to the audience for your attention.
Thank you. That was fast.
Próxima estación, Zócalo.
Muy buenos días. Es un gusto para nosotros recibirlos en Ciudad de México y contar con la presencia en este evento de Pepe Merino, el jefe de la Agencia Digital de Transformación Digital de México, anteriormente de la Ciudad de México. Pepe, muchas gracias por acompañarnos.
Al contrario, muchas gracias por invitarme.
Con gusto. Bueno, tienes la misión ahora de encabezar la primera agencia de transformación digital a nivel nacional. Pero antes de eso, tuviste el mismo rol en la Ciudad de México. ¿Podrías contarnos cómo empezó ese proyecto? ¿Cuál fue la misión?
La idea central, y digamos, a veces cuando uno llega tarde a las cosas, tiene una ventaja porque tienes la posibilidad de aprender de experiencias exitosas y no tan exitosas de otros países, ¿no? Y una de las primeras cosas que fue muy claro para nosotros es que el modelo de innovación pública para la Ciudad de México, y en este caso para México, pues tenía que tener otra lógica, ¿no? Lo primero fue unificar toda la agenda de tecnología e innovación bajo un mismo techo, desde infraestructura tecnológica, conectividad, simplificación, digitalización, y eso crea un ecosistema de innovación que permite usar con mucho mayor eficiencia recursos públicos, ¿no? Lo segundo es un modelo que en su momento no era para nada exitoso, tampoco lo de unificar, por cierto, y todavía no lo es del todo, que es un modelo de autoprovisionamiento. En lugar de administrar contratos privados, nosotros le apostamos a un modelo en donde dentro del propio gobierno se generan las soluciones tecnológicas, ¿no? Y eso implicó crear una fábrica de software que generó todos los desarrollos necesarios para la ciudad y que es un modelo que pensamos replicar a nivel nacional. Lo tercero es, en lugar de partir de un fetiche con la tecnología, pensar en los problemas específicos de una ciudad como México, ¿no? Uno se asoma a ver experiencias en el mundo y usualmente en ciudades con un nivel de ingreso mayor, pues le apuestan a ciertas soluciones que, en el caso de la Ciudad de México, siendo una ciudad de 9 millones de habitantes de noche, 15 millones de habitantes de día, con una disparidad en ingresos y oportunidades que se ha mejorado, pero que todavía está presente, pues realmente lo que nosotros pensamos es, hagamos el catálogo de problemas que creemos se pueden enfrentar y a partir de eso pensemos en las soluciones tecnológicas, ¿no? Cuando uno parte al revés, pues como dicen en el país del norte, cuando tienes un martillo en la mano, todo parece un clavo, ¿no? Y realmente nosotros le apostamos a un modelo para solucionar problemas específicos de una ciudad como la Ciudad de México. Y finalmente, un tema de acceso, ¿no? Uno de los lemas del proyecto político del que yo formo parte y la presidenta Claudia Sheinbaum es por el bien de todos, primero los pobres. Y nosotros llevamos este principio también al tema de innovación y soluciones tecnológicas, ¿no? Quienes más sufren en su interacción cotidiana con los gobiernos, quienes más invierten proporcionalmente tiempo, dinero, recursos para poder acceder a trámites, por ejemplo, pues son quienes tienen menores ingresos. Entonces, si uno no parte de una visión progresiva en donde priorice el volumen de interacciones de quienes más requieren al gobierno para estar bien en sus vidas, pues uno no está haciendo lo que nosotros consideramos debe ser la tecnología pública. La tecnología pública para nosotros es un habilitador de derechos. Es un mecanismo que permite a las personas, mujeres, hombres, a acceder a lo que tienen derecho, ¿no? Servicios públicos, educación, salud. Uno no debe olvidar nunca que toda interacción con el gobierno abre puertas de posibilidades, ¿no? Tú no sacas un acta de nacimiento como una por gusto, ¿no? Usualmente obtienes un acta de nacimiento porque quieres hacer otro trámite, por ejemplo, ingresar a la escuela, ¿no? Entonces, hay una secuencia de procedimientos gubernamentales que permiten a las personas acceder a lo que tienen derecho y abrirse caminos de prosperidad, ¿no?
Y ahora, de cara al plan de llevar esta agencia a la escala nacional, ¿cuáles han identificado como algunos de los retos y las oportunidades?
Pues nosotros lo que creemos que el modelo, y lo digo con mucha humildad, de la Ciudad de México fue un modelo exitoso, ¿no? Y que ahora está empezando a ser replicado en otros lugares del país y de la región. Creo que el reto más importante es confirmar que aun cuando la Ciudad de México es una ciudad de dimensiones enormes, tenemos que demostrar que este es un modelo que puede ser replicable y sustentable a nivel nacional, ¿no? Y en ese sentido, la Agencia de Transformación Digital y Telecomunicaciones le apuesta a estos 4 principios que enumeré al principio y unifica 13 agendas bajo un mismo techo institucional, sobre todo con un principio de dar soluciones a otras autoridades para que a su vez atiendan a las personas del país, ¿no? Ciberseguridad, vamos a crear por primera vez un Plan Nacional de Ciberseguridad Pública para garantizar disponibilidad y seguridad de datos. Infraestructura tecnológica, unificar todas las capacidades instaladas del gobierno federal para crear una nube propia del gobierno. La fábrica de software, ¿no? De nuevo, nosotros le apostamos a que todas las soluciones, los desarrollos sean generados en casa. Una política nacional de espectro para garantizar cobertura y competencia en la provisión privada, pero también la provisión pública de Internet. En México el Internet es un derecho, en la Ciudad de México también, y el Estado tiene que tutelar que toda persona tenga una alternativa cercana, abierta, libre, gratuita, para poder conectarse. El Internet es un habilitador de derechos, ¿no? Política satelital, ¿no? La política espacial mexicana. La presidenta ha anunciado el lanzamiento de un satélite mexicano para provisión de servicios de conectividad en áreas remotas, pero también para servicios estratégicos del gobierno. Simplificación, le apostamos a, como en la Ciudad de México, a reducir a la mitad el número de trámites, a la mitad el número de requisitos, a la mitad del tiempo destinado por las personas para acceder a esto y tener disponible de manera digital por lo menos el 80% de todos los servicios y trámites provistos por el gobierno. Digitalización, es decir, todo este proceso de reingeniería de procesos y trámites, mudarlo en línea. Compras públicas de tecnología. Ninguna autoridad puede adquirir tecnología sin que la agencia la autorice y esto garantiza interoperabilidad, escalabilidad, poder donar código y por supuesto, austeridad, ¿no? No erogar recursos de manera innecesaria en soluciones tecnológicas. Un servicio de atención ciudadana de no emergencias 24 horas, 7 días a la semana, como existe en la Ciudad de México, de modo que todas las personas del país sepan que pueden marcar un solo número y no solo se les va a dar información, sino pueden resolver ahí de manera de punta a punta algunos trámites y servicios. Y crearemos el Centro de Inteligencia de Datos como un área de servicios. Es una especie de consultoría dentro del gobierno sobre datos. Esto incluye datos abiertos, datos geoespaciales, análisis de estadística inferencial y, por supuesto, herramientas analíticas de última generación como inteligencia artificial, algoritmos, redes neuronales, para incrementar recaudación, tanto impuestos como aduanas. Y finalmente lanzaremos el Centro Nacional de Tecnología Pública. Este centro procurará que se replique el modelo de la Ciudad de México y ahora del país en el resto de gobiernos locales, haciendo un acompañamiento no solo de código, sino también de todas las capacidades institucionales y normativas que deben acompañar este proceso. Y además crearemos la Escuela Nacional de Código para Servidores Públicos, de modo que no importa el nivel de gobierno, siempre existan servidores, servidoras, capaces de dar mantenimiento a los sistemas que nosotros les demos y que se garantice la no obsolescencia, ¿no? Entonces, es una agenda ambiciosa, ¿no? Pero tenemos el respaldo, por supuesto, de la presidenta y tenemos la experiencia adquirida en la ciudad y estamos seguros que llegará a buen puerto.
Seguro que sí, muchas gracias, Pepe, por compartir estos proyectos. Seguro todos los presentes estarán siguiendo con mucha atención el desarrollo de todas estas iniciativas en los próximos años. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias.
Bueno, este panel me entusiasma mucho porque se habla y leemos de la teoría sobre recuperar el espacio público pero no tanto de la práctica, y este panel va a tratar de contar cómo se hace en la práctica. Para quienes nos visitan fuera de México, Román dirigió por los últimos 6 años la SEDATU, es la agencia pública encargada de diseñar los espacios urbanos y el uso de la tierra en México. Entonces te quería preguntar, Román, que nos cuentes cómo fue el programa de mejoramiento urbano que implementaste en estos 6 años.
Claro, pues muchas gracias a todos. El programa consta, digamos, de 3 elementos. Lo que ahorita vamos a abordar es el tema de la planeación, el ordenamiento territorial y cómo posteriormente fue bajando a nivel local con equipamientos y espacios públicos. Datos importantes de planeación que se hicieron en la administración pasada, estamos hablando que se actualizaron el 43% de los programas de desarrollo urbano municipales, estatales y regionales. Y como podrán ver, se trabajó particularmente en la parte centro y sur del país, donde proyectos importantes de infraestructura del gobierno federal, estamos hablando en el caso del Tren Maya, el Istmo de Tehuantepec, estamos hablando del nuevo Aeropuerto Internacional Felipe Ángeles, están como elementos detonadores del desarrollo regional, donde el programa de mejoramiento urbano, que es un programa que conforma infraestructura pública a través de espacios públicos, equipamientos, estamos hablando de mercados, primarias, secundarias, preparatorias, universidades, clínicas de salud, espacios públicos deportivos, se llevaron a cabo a nivel nacional. ¿Cuáles, digamos, en términos generales, pudimos llegar a la meta de casi 1.300 equipamientos y espacios públicos a nivel nacional en las zonas de mayor marginación, de mayor carencia en México? También, a su vez, se realizaron aproximadamente en las inmediaciones 400,000 acciones de vivienda, se regularizaron prácticamente 100,000 viviendas también en estos equipamientos y como podrán ver, gran parte de estas intervenciones van a lo largo de lo que serían los grandes proyectos de infraestructura. En este caso, 2 de ellos son corredores de tren, del Tren Maya y el corredor del Istmo de Tehuantepec, donde se está llevando ahora una política nacional, digamos, de desarrollo regional para esta zona de México.
¿Y cuáles eran los objetivos del programa?
Los objetivos del programa es poder conformar equipamientos, infraestructura básica en las colonias de mayor marginación. Aquellas colonias que se han venido desdoblando de los años 80, 90 hasta el día de hoy, que carecen absolutamente de todo, desde agua, luz, drenaje, pavimentación, y este programa se centró en una infraestructura que consideramos que es la más importante o la que junta todas las necesidades, que es el espacio público. El espacio público como la infraestructura de mayor importancia en una lógica urbana, en una lógica local, eso es, digamos, como se asentó el programa.
Fernanda, tú trabajaste, si no me equivoco, en 7 proyectos.
Exacto.
De estos, ¿no? Cuéntanos un poco cómo fueron estos proyectos. Mira esa imagen. Cuéntanos qué es.
Son 7 proyectos desarrollados en 2 localidades, en Naco, en Sonora y en Agua Prieta, son en el desierto, y bueno, forman parte de los miles de proyectos de SEDATU liderados por Román y constituyen diferentes espacios públicos. Hay centros deportivos, casa para adultos mayores, centros cívicos, lugares…
Esa es el muro, ¿no?
Este es el muro.
Ese es el muro porque de este lado es México, es Sonora, del otro lado es Arizona.
Del otro lado es Douglas, Arizona, donde cruzan 4,000 personas al día y hasta ahora no tenían una banca, una sombra, un baño, un lugar para lavarse las manos.
¿Cómo fue hacer este proyecto ahí?
Fue impresionante, fue durante la pandemia, entonces había un reto adicional y se hace un parque lineal. La biblioteca fue como el remate, el punto más cercano al cruce y la idea era justo todo lo que da como hacia atrás, el patio trasero de una relación muy violenta con el muro, transformar eso en un espacio público. Estas son las imágenes del sitio previo y aquí ya el parque lineal. Nos acercamos lo más posible, la idea era cómo transformar un lugar caracterizado por la violencia, la pobreza, etcétera, en un lugar seguro, pero además que diera una identidad propia y que rompiera esa sensación pues de distancia que hay con el muro. Entonces nos acercamos lo más posible y la idea fue transformar el muro en un lugar, ¿no? O sea, realmente convertir esto en un lugar siempre abierto. Hay una biblioteca arriba, pero para quien no va a entrar o no quiere trabajar o no sabe leer, que pueda usar baños públicos, que tenga espacios con sombra. Es el lugar donde se hacen conciertos, se llevan a cabo muchísimas actividades públicas y cívicas y se conectan con 2 kilómetros de parque que además se vincula con un espacio deportivo. Y la idea, como ven con la rampa, es poder ver el otro lado, que siempre hay como esta sensación de distancia, pero también por primera vez que la comunidad pueda verse a sí misma. Son lugares que siempre se han considerado lugares de paso, son construcciones súper horizontales, todo Agua Prieta tiene 1 o 2 niveles de altura y por primera vez se pueden ver a ellos mismos, ¿no? Entonces también como generar un nuevo sentido de identidad y siempre con materiales locales, celosías. Esto es un mercado, esto es en Naco. Siempre la prioridad pues, es la seguridad, ¿no? Entonces generar espacios donde todo siempre sea visible, no tienes necesidad de aire acondicionado, siempre todo está abierto y aquí igual el mercado es solo una excusa para generar un mirador y poder ver al otro lado, pero también ver las montañas, la vista y verse a ellos mismos, ¿no?
El simbolismo es increíble, ¿no? De estos proyectos y de estas estructuras. ¿Qué impacto tuvo en la comunidad? ¿Qué feedback tuvieron de ellos?
Se han vuelto los lugares donde pueden salir a la calle, porque además, no, como dice Román, no había calles pavimentadas, no había alumbrado público, entonces no solo hacer edificios, sino más bien construir comunidades y hay sistemas de captación de agua. O sea, aquí lo que vemos es un techo, pero en realidad hay capas y capas de todo un trabajo social, comunitario que se hizo y la gente se los ha apropiado. Es el lugar donde hay conciertos, es la foto de la graduación, hay estos lugares, por ejemplo, la casa de adultos mayores. Estoy pasando los proyectos los más grandes y luego los más chicos y son para distintas edades, siempre alrededor de temas de identidad como la tipología del patio, ¿no? Entonces, generar espacios abiertos, públicos y seguros.
Román, ¿cómo fue trabajar con arquitectos como Fernanda? Ustedes daban las guías y ella decidía los proyectos. ¿Cómo fue esa interacción?
Bueno, un año antes de que entrara una retroexcavadora, digamos, ya la construcción per se, se definen, digamos, cuáles son las áreas geográficas. Esta fue la frontera con Estados Unidos y se trabaja con las comunidades, con las autoridades locales, se hace una metodología de entrevistas, cuestionarios y se hace una cartera de proyectos, un plan maestro. Y sobre esa carta de proyectos se define cuáles son las prioridades con base en una bolsa determinada de recursos y posteriormente se hace una selección, se hace una invitación a diferentes arquitectos que han trabajado con espacios públicos, que han trabajado, digamos, con lo público, que ese es, digamos, el común denominador para seleccionar a estos arquitectos, y ya con ellos se incorporan al trabajo de forma previa para que cuando ya inicie el programa arquitectónico, que es decir, qué es lo que va a construir y cómo se va a construir, entonces ellos ya tienen esa información y hacemos retroalimentación muy fluida para que en un periodo muy corto de 3 meses pasemos desde un anteproyecto conceptual a un ejecutivo, 3 meses y medio, y posteriormente ya arranque el proceso de construcción.
Fernanda, ¿qué significa recuperar esos espacios públicos? Para alguien que está en la frontera, ve ese muro tan violento en algún sentido, tener ahora esto.
A ver, todos están en espacios residuales, no había casi como la idea de terreno, ¿no? Era más bien como encontrar el lugar donde ubicarlo y sobre todo conectarlo con cosas que ya existían, por ejemplo, una cancha de béisbol, o sea, buscar como estas posibilidades dentro de los proyectos y el programa en realidad es solo una excusa, o sea, hay una biblioteca para personas que a lo mejor nunca la van a usar, pero que puedan usar el espacio público de abajo, que puedan ir a un baño, que puedan tener un lugar donde sentarse. Y lo mismo, por ejemplo, si no vas a jugar nunca a un deporte, pero es el lugar donde los domingos vas a pasear. Entonces, el programa para mí es solo una excusa para transformar el sitio y realmente darle la vuelta a un terreno donde parecía que ni siquiera había terreno.
Román, decías que había más de 1.700, casi 1.700 proyectos. ¿Cuál es tu favorito?
1,300 aproximadamente, hay varios. Algunos, por ejemplo, en Tijuana o en la frontera con Estados Unidos, este caso particular, estamos hablando de la Jico, ese es un parque que tiene una gran aceptación por la localidad, digamos, la población local. O sea, todos los días las madres de familia salen y limpian esos equipamientos, esos espacios públicos, entonces se generan sentimientos digamos, de apropiación del espacio. Y creo que es uno de los éxitos o es el valor agregado de la arquitectura. O sea, con la arquitectura, cuando tiene un valor agregado en el espacio público, puede generar las condiciones de apropiación de las comunidades hacia ese espacio y un sentido de identidad. Y en muchas ocasiones, no solamente aquí en la frontera con Estados Unidos, sino también en Tapachula, en otras zonas de México, el poder generar un sentido de identidad a nivel local, de orgullo de estas propias comunidades, es, digamos, uno de los grandes factores que inciden en este tipo de proyectos.
¿Y hay algún elemento común que dirías para estos casi 1,300 proyectos?
El diseño arquitectónico, digamos, poder garantizar que la obra pública se haga de la mejor forma posible con una investigación previa y que la calidad es una forma de poderse asegurar que cuando el gobierno se retira de entregar este tipo de infraestructuras, hay mayor capacidad de éxito a que puedan permanecer a lo largo de los próximos años.
Fernando, ¿y qué aprendiste haciendo esto en lugares como Naco, Agua Prieta, en Sonora?
Aprendí muchísimo, en parte eso, cómo hacer que los edificios duren y tengan un aspecto como atemporal, porque no puedes controlar lo que vaya a pasar, ¿no? Entonces, fácil reposición, bajo mantenimiento, o sea, pensando en edificios que estén blindados de muchas formas, porque también construir a distancia y sobre todo en la pandemia.
Hace mucho calor ahí, ¿no?
Hace mucho calor, luego hace mucho frío, los obreros que se contratan, que por fin aprenden a hacer determinada cosa, a las 2 o 3 semanas se van y cruzan y ya no trabajan en el proyecto. Entonces, hay una serie de complejidades y por eso las obras se hacen de la manera más simple. Para mí era blindar el proyecto pensando en qué pasa si no hay mucha supervisión, qué pasa si el presupuesto no tiene las condiciones o lo que vaya a pasar en el futuro, cambios de gobierno, etcétera, cómo permanece y cómo, lo que dice Román, la gente se lo puede apropiar y de distintas maneras. Entonces, hicimos, por ejemplo, un auditorio donde en lugar de ser cerrado y que sea un costo mantenerlo, es un espacio abierto, se puede usar de diferentes formas, es casi una plaza, hay otra plaza también que en realidad la excusa es hacer unos baños públicos y justo tener como esa posibilidad de que se interpreten y se transformen con el tiempo.
Para cerrar, les quería preguntar a ambos, hay muchos arquitectos, hay alcaldes, jefe de gobierno, ¿se animan a dar un consejo para que quienes quieran seguir esta recuperación de espacios públicos, cuáles serían las claves?
Bueno, nuestro consejo, en lo que yo he aprendido en estos años, es trabajar en territorio. O sea, la política pública puede, digamos, tener una desviación, pero siempre cuando tú vayas a campo a revisar continuamente, que estés en tu agenda de trabajo, decir 70% de mi tiempo lo voy a dedicar a no estar en la oficina, sin estar en territorio. La supervisión de las políticas de vivienda, equipamiento, infraestructura. Creo que es una de las grandes claves como servidor público, es en temas urbanos, en temas de política metropolitana, siempre estar en territorio. Eso es lo que te da, digamos, la sensación térmica de si estás haciendo bien las cosas o no.
¿Y Fernanda? ¿Tu consejo?
También trabajar con la comunidad. Entender que el cliente muchas veces no es el que paga el edificio, sino es el que lo usa.
Román, Fernanda, muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
All right. Hello. I am so happy to be here in Mexico City, which is honestly one of my favorite places to eat in the entire world. And I am here with two chefs who I really admire because they do so much more than just cook. They are using food to preserve and promote local traditions, build up their communities, and really solve tangible social issues within the cities that they are in. I want to start with you, Manu. You put Curitiba sort of on the culinary map. You could have opened your restaurant anywhere in Brazil and honestly the world. Why did you open in Curitiba? And then talk to me about the kind of impact a restaurant can have on a city, and particularly a city that is not a major urban center of a country.
Well, I believe Curitiba chose me, and I chose Curitiba. It's a great place, and it's really involved with sustainability. And it's the same size as a big city. It's a big city, but it's local products, and a lot of invest in urban gardens. So today it's a huge opportunity for the community, and I always believe that restaurant can impact. It doesn't matter the size of the restaurant, but how can we impact? How can we share our knowledge as a chef with information and education to the city? You know, this, I think, sharing is the most important thing that we have, and all the learning that we have through the food, because food can connect people, can connect us back to the lands, and can connect the city to the restaurant. I believe it doesn't matter the size of the restaurants, doesn't matter if they are in the city or in the countryside, but it's our job as a chef or working side by side with public politics. And I think we can solve many problems as hunger, as how we can share that information about food, how we can make the people eat better, how can understand their body. And I think this is a job, not just mine, but I think the city. So Manu is supposed to be just a small restaurant, but became really big because I want to share. I want to bring back everything that I want as a word, having a microphone, having a stage, using my life and my knowledge as an example to the city, to the people who live in Curitiba. And I think this is something that I truly believe.
Fatmata, you were born and raised in Sierra Leone, and you have this really amazing pop-up series where you showcase your Fulani heritage. Why do you feel like it is important to sort of preserve and promote that heritage, and sort of what do you see as the biggest goal of your dinner series?
Thank you, Pia. So for me, even though I grew up in Freetown, Sierra Leone, my food and connection with the Fulani tribe shapes me a lot because it transcends beyond one city. The Fulanis are nomads, and that spirit drives my approach and connection with food because it's more than the ingredients. It's about the journey. It's about the traditions, the connections also between communities, and also the core principles of sustainability. Mm-hmm. At Dine on a Mat, our main goal is to create vibrant dishes and also inspire, change through food, because the restaurant serves as an invitation for our guests to step outside of their comfort zone and explore flavor and sustenance through the palates of women in rural areas. So for me, it's very important to tell these stories, preserve culture, and also promote African gastronomy and spark conversation beyond local communities.
What kind of change do you think that a person sitting at a dinner like this can spark?
A lot, because one, there's something powerful about dining on the floor. Yeah. It makes you, release your guard. It doesn't have all these dining etiquettes, the pressure of Western dining etiquette, because you sit on pillows, you wash your hands in calabash, which is a sustainable bowl. Yeah. You eat with your hands, and we tell stories through food. And there is always that natural way to connect with people by passing the bowl to the next person. It's more than a dining experience, and it makes you focus on what truly matters, which is the flavor of the food and the shared experience.
Do you feel like the heritage of Fulani cooking is at risk of being lost without the work of people like you?
Yes, it is, because if you look at dining now, there's a huge shift because of urbanization, globalization, and indigenous food systems are under siege also with the forces of globalization, right. Environmental degradation, and all of this. So it's really important for me to share these stories, bring these women along, by telling their stories through food, because food is the easiest way to connect with people.
Right.
It's a declaration of love. It's the one thing that really connects us. So I really think it's fading away. People are doing grab and go now. You know, most people don't even have time to cook food at home. And I see the mat as a way to create space for people to reflect on how we eat, and a way for us to go back also in times, and so we can create a renewed relationship with our food culture and connect deeper.
I feel like if there's anything you take away is that like a restaurant is not just a restaurant. A restaurant can be so much more. And Manu, your restaurant is the perfect example of that, because you work with the city to transform vacant lots into community gardens. You also have started a food distribution project in Curitiba. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that work, how it's played out, the impacts, the challenges. And then the last thing I'll ask you is how the kinds of projects that you've implemented can be replicated in other cities.
So it wasn't easy, you know, because we started the foundation 7 years ago. And I really want to do something. And we started as really small. And the first project I worked with the city was the urban gardens. Curitiba today has a beautiful projects, urban gardens, that we as an institution went to the gardens, helping and teach them that's not just broccolis, but that new way, and some vegetables and fruits that is native from Brazil, and that is like more proteins, like the beans, like the chickpeas. So we starting to get involved and decide with working with them. Today they have 120 urban gardens around the city. And they have to do their own compost. And then we have the farm, the urban farm. It's like a university inside of the city, but the people can go in. They have a lot of courses that they can do. And besides that, we did this beautiful project that called Alimenta Curitiba, in English, Feed Curitiba. It's, we have four times in a year. The big one is gonna happen now in December. We choose a community that needs us, and then we implement, we go in the community and then research what they need from us. Sometimes it's cooking classes, teaching them like a recipe. We did a book last year in one community that we're gonna share with them how to use the whole products, the whole vegetables, how you can use lemon to produce like a soap. And you know, so we get into the community to understand. And after the event, it's like 2 days event, we have this beautiful box, like 7 kilos, with all the things that they needed, because we do a research before. And then we have many projects inside of the foundation, but the ones that we work side by side with the city is these two. And now we are getting a new one, working just for a woman. It's a school we call Flying Butterfly. It's gonna be starting in February. It's how we work with the woman to get the power of them, because when you cook, you have the power to transform. And most of them, they are immigration. They come from other countries, Haiti, Venezuela, Bolivia. And we are starting a school, teach them to get a new job, to get the power of the family, to get more money, you know, and then to teach their kids how to eat better, how they can provide better health. So this is kind of the work we do with them. And I believe, of course, Manu starting the work as a restaurant, but became really big because we care. We care about the city, we care about the community. And it's not just about the restaurant, but it's about the change. What do you want for the future of the city?
You know, I think what you all are doing is really amazing. And I think a lot of communities have ideas to do community gardens, to distribute food. But it is very hard to do that at scale and in a way that will have a tangible long-term impact. How have you all been able to do that?
Of course, it's not just me. I have like a group of girls and guys who help us. So we started, and it's funny because when we create the foundation, none of them has to be with foods. Like the president of our foundation is working in the education department. And the vice president, she works as an engineer. She's a CEO in an engineer company. And all the girls who is in the picture, they are in different parts, but they together, we want to make the difference. And so this is projects we connecting people. I believe you don't need to become big, but you can connect people, you can make the connection, and then you can create something amazing. Of course, the project that Flying Butterfly, I starting develop with them, but I'm not involved in. You know, I just connecting a really amazing girl who is working education with Just Woman, the immigration department of the city, and they became bigger, but we connected and we used our foundation to help them with the money, with the company to develop the projects. I believe this is the word, you know. It's not mine, but it's for the people to the city, and this is the word that we always use, is connection.
You've done such a good job really empowering other people to feel like this is my project too. Everyone sort of feels like it's ours. You know, on that note, Fatmata, I really love I really admire the work that you do, particularly because it speaks to something I believe very strongly, which is, you know, when it comes to tackling big issues like climate change, we often are looking forward to, you know, advanced technology, but not often looking to the indigenous communities who have had a lot of these best practices long before, you know, we were alive. And I feel like this is something that you do. You have helped put Fonio, a grain, on the culinary map. I'm wondering if you could talk about the importance of including indigenous traditions and communities in conversations about climate and broader social issues.
It's very important because I believe Africa itself is a diverse ritual of indigenous food systems, and these systems hold invaluable knowledge that could be passed down through generations. And now we are talking about climate change, food insecurity, loss, all of it, hunger. When we have this knowledge, it's just there, within reach. It's really about just collaborating. Because one thing I've learned spending time in these communities, because it started from going there for inspiration, and then the foundation was born through that. And women and people in rural communities, they don't do contracts. They believe in trust, word of mouth. Like when you say something, if I'm going to buy a bag of fonio or a bag of rice, you show up when you say that.
Yeah.
And then from there, building that trust, for me, it was important to also bring in people who can do the heavy lifting. So most of my collaboration is with FAO, which is Food and Agriculture of the United Nations, because they do the technical side. I'm just a chef who is passionate and who is trying to be conscious day by day. And we've been able to train like 100 women recently how to grow fonio, also package it well, place value, and we are trying to also tackle the 4 betters, which means better production, better nutrition, better environment, and better life. Because we have all these sustainable grains, but the problem is they are still stuck in the traditional ways of processing it. As much as the indigenous food systems and some of the best traditional practices are good, but some things you have to innovate for it to thrive. So I've been able to bridge between preserving tradition and best practices and also creating space for innovation, which is like mechanization.
Yeah.
Because the women are growing fonio, but the reason why it hasn't taken off, because it's very tedious to process. They still stamp on it to process here, so you need to scale. So that's where people like the FAO, the UN Tourism, they come in, and then they help, like the Basque Culinary Center, which she's a jury, so she's part of the judges. They've been also very supportive in helping me, you know, ease that burden and also inspire the women that what they have is so valuable and it's scalable.
The last thing I want to ask, because we are in this room full of policymakers, and food may not feel like an obvious connection, but I think that food can be an incredibly valuable tool to affect social change in a way that other things cannot. And I'm wondering if each of you quickly can talk about, you know, the value that food can bring in terms of bringing about sustainable long-term change in communities.
Okay. I believe food is universal language. It is, we all know that. It's a bridge. It's the easiest way we can connect. And I believe it can be used as a tool for change. Years back, I was not serving, basically, because I come from Fulanis, which
Yeah.
we have our issues as much as we contribute in good ways to the biodiversity, because we are nomads, we are crossing borders, so we have challenges with farmers. And I remember I used to use my dinner as a means to host like peace dinners between farmers and Fulani people who were having cattle farm invasion. So for me, I've seen that. I'm from Sierra Leone. I went through civil war, and food was our only ally during those dark days, in Freetown, Sierra Leone. So in a nutshell, food is powerful. It's a bridge and can connect us if it's used properly.
Manu, what do you think?
Well, of course, I'm going to use all the words that she said. It's for me too. But just use an example as my country, like Brazil is an immigration country. And if you go to New York, as an example, Paris, or even Brazil, you see the only thing who connected when you leave your country and then you decided to call home another country, what do you bring with you? Food.
Yeah.
We can see the restaurants all over New York. You can eat in New York all over the country. You can find even Kazakhstan restaurants, I know, in Brooklyn, but because the restaurant and the food connect you back from your roots.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that I want to do, how food is power, how can, connect you back to something that you love.
And even as chefs.
Yes.
We're all connected to food,
Thank you both so much, and thank you so much
for
being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Priya. Thank you.
Good morning. Cities, of course, are vital and complex organisms constantly in flux, changing shape with new technologies, shifting demographics, climate change, and, of course, new ideas, some of them revolutionary. Artists and architects can, and many do, play visionary roles interpreting those constant changes, and also many of them affecting profound changes themselves. We're going to be talking about transformation with two of the most creative people in Mexico City, in Mexico actually, and even beyond, who take things as they are and have historically been and transform them into things radically quite different and exciting. Enrique, you have used architecture as your medium for urban transformation. Tell us about one of those projects, the Amparo Museum, and how you transformed that existing space into something really radically different, but yet respecting its cultural tradition and what it had been before.
Thank you very much. I'd be happy to. The Amparo Museum is located in Puebla, in the city of Puebla, which is I consider one of the hidden treasures of our country. It's a wonderful city. The downtown of Puebla is protected by UNESCO, but also by our Institute of Anthropology. And we were invited to work on this project by the Amparo Foundation, who had put together already 7 different buildings of different times in history, with different qualities, but all charged with tremendous history and tradition. Our role was to organize differently these buildings, articulate all of these buildings, transform it into a new condition and new spaces that would help the museum both be able to show their array of collections. They have 4 very important collections, and reutilize a building or a series of buildings that are part of the heritage of the city of Puebla and of the region. So there's basically 2 important ideas here. One, from a sustainability point of view, you reutilize both the materials and the energy
that has been spent for many centuries, I would say, in that same site. So you use that energy, you use that materials, but on the other hand, all of that is highly loaded of history and tradition. So you also rescue and use as a base for the future what we have already learned from many centuries. And with this last slide, you can see where both contemporary architecture and the traditional architecture come together and establish a new dialogue and look forward to a new condition of a city based on its own history. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's been my privilege to go to Puebla, and I urge all of you to do that, particularly with that extraordinary museum. Pedro, you conjure new life from existing material through sculpture and as a means to enhance a city. Tell us how you transform remarkably weapons into new structures that are actually life-enhancing, if not life-creating.
Thank you, Elliot. Well, you know, I like using this concept of society, which is the art of healing society. And what I do with that is, you know, like taking weapons. We do gun buybacks, where it's a coming together of private companies who provide gift cards that can be traded for guns, and these guns are then melted and made into shovels to plant trees. We transform 1,500 guns into 1,500 shovels, and we planted 1,500 trees. And then we started to come up with more ideas on how to do that. For instance, we took 7,000 weapons, and we decided to make musical instruments with them. I have here what used to be a rifle, and a rifle, like a shotgun or any kind of long gun, has been engineered to kill or to produce harm. And by drilling holes in this object, now it's a flute. And we made hundreds of instruments that are played by local orchestras and that travel from one place to the other. And this is a process of changing the polarity of an agent of death into an agent of life, because the element continues to exist, but now instead of, you know, like if I had said, like, I have a gun, you would like kind of be scared. But now this gun produces music. So is this social sculpture, because the social sculpture is a concept where part of what your sculptures give form to materials. And here the material is society, like kind of a social relationship. So it's how do you take different elements from government to private companies to the civic society and make a new kind of a contract with these parts to produce change.
It's really remarkable. Unfortunately, we don't have time for a flute concert, but you get the idea. And if you get a chance to read more, you'll see these extraordinary shovels and the life that they generate. Just quickly, you each come to transformation in compelling but very different ways. The leaders in this audience are also not necessarily artists, but they transform cities. And they try to do so, and most of them very creatively as well. What insight would you offer them as artists, architects, as to that creative spirit that they can apply in what they do to transform cities into better living organisms?
Yes, thank you, Elliot. In a nutshell, I would say transformation is also change. So the first thing is do not fear change. Change is good. The second thing that I would say is that every city in the world has a tremendous stock of built material. Not all of the material is excellent, not all of it is good, but there's tremendous energy already spent in all of that. So our task is to understand what we have and not preserve what we have, but change what we have and adapt it into the contemporary conditions of this moment in time.
But not necessarily destroying it while you're
No. It's using what you have and then transforming it and inventing a new opportunity for those same, not only buildings, but also public space, nature, everything.
Even spaces are objects that might have a negative connotation today or aren't working, you think can be transformed in positive ways.
Yeah, it's a case-by-case thing, but I think we should try to take whatever we have and transform it into a very new condition that will help us articulate differently our places, our cities, and our quality of life.
Pedro.
Well, I think that, oftentimes, wherever you go in the world, there will be a lot of talk about technology, but not all problems are to be solved by technology. There's a lot of moments where you actually, and we're starting to learn that in education, or nutrition, in many things where less technology is better. How do we take our eyes out of the screen because we're so addicted to it? It's like, these machines are producing this addiction. So encounter spaces where you meet face-to-face are now a new concept of quality of life. And this is where the arts can help, to bring community together. Because, as much as we have this sort of connecting now with all these technologies, we also need to have real space and real time with others. And that's, when all these cultural expressions and architecture and real space come to help. So I believe that it's very, very important to also think in this humanistic approach.
So space for human connection and not necessarily technological distraction as well. We just have a minute, a parting thought of any kind of inspiration either of you would like to offer, if you can't play the flute for us.
Well, the thing about we have this problem of guns in a community, and less guns are always correlated with less deaths. So sometimes the approach is to say, we need more police, more cameras, more security. But you can start with the kind of a very, very concrete agent that causes the deaths, and by trying to remove this element from a community, you will see a kind of a concrete result. So that's why, we work on these constant gun buyback programs.
Well, as everyone in this audience knows, that message is one that Mike Bloomberg in particular personally understands deeply. Enrique, a final thought?
Well, I would go back and say it's an initial thought, where I want to take these few seconds to thank Mayor Bloomberg. I don't know if he's here, but he'll always be my mayor, and we consider him mayor of mayors. And I would like to thank Patty Harris, a dear friend of mine, for bringing this to Mexico, and the Aspen Institute and yourself for allowing us to have this wonderful conversation.
Thank you. We're very lucky you're a citizen both of New York and of Mexico City. And we're all benefiting from their inspiration. And I now would like to thank you all for being with us at the morning plenary. And we'll see you again in various activities between now and when we return here at 3 o'clock. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. Thank you for that walk-up song, the Colorado Rocky Mountain High, which is where the Aspen Institute was founded 75 years ago. And we are so excited to be here in Mexico City for our first CityLab in Latin America. Please join me in thanking this great city and its mayor for the extraordinary hospitality. Let us also thank all who prepared our meals and drove our shuttles and housed us in comfort and designed this stage and so much more. Thank you to the amazing staff. And let us also thank our Bloomberg Aspen colleagues who brought this summit into being, especially Patty Harris, Jim Anderson, Bumi Akinosotu, Ava Hartman, Elliot Gerson, the leaders of Aspen Mexico, Enrique Baruga and Luis Geraldo de Valle, and of course, Mayor Mike Bloomberg himself. Thank you all. "75 years ago, in the aftermath of World War and Holocaust, the use of nuclear weapons, the rise of the Soviet state, a group of thinkers and leaders from business, from academia, came together in those Colorado Rockies, which was then a sleepy silver town of Aspen, to pursue a bold purpose, to ignite human potential, to build understanding, and promote new possibilities for a better world. That was our calling when we were founded as the Aspen Institute, and today we have grown to become a global leadership and convening organization that serves the one and the many, that partners with leaders in communities everywhere to promote the common good. And this includes 13 global Aspens, not only Aspen Mexico, but also other Aspens like Aspen Colombia, who is here today, Aspen India, Aspen Germany, Aspen United Kingdom, and an incredible group, 10 colleagues, talking and organizing for freedom in Aspen, Kyiv, in Ukraine. The idea is that we can build an interconnected global leadership community, and that's exactly what CityLab is all about. Connection and collaboration and collective impact. It's why we are so proud to co-host this convening each year with the extraordinary team at Bloomberg Philanthropies. And for me, running through the spirit of this convening is the idea of civic imagination, which is expressed by our artists and our novelists, by our urban planners and our politicians, by everyday business leaders and communities, small businesses, by the people that enjoy the cultural life of a city. The idea of a city, the imagination that brings people into relationship in cities is a big part of what powers us here today. I know it's what you all believe in. The clash of ideas that leads to breakthrough possibilities, the notion that people can live together in fellow feeling, cooperation, to address the great issues of the time and create a spirited community where people love each other and work together and grow in harmony. And that is what this place is about, and that's what this panel discussion will all be about. Over the next few hours, we will hear from the author and former mayor of Bogota, Enrique Peñalosa, in dialogue with the extraordinary journalist Eduardo Porter about how public spaces and projects are catalyzing Bogota's growth. We also will engage with Mayor Shin from Songnam, South Korea, and the urban planner Daphne Lundy, who will discuss the role of cities in fostering, yes, romantic relationships, and along with that, addressing declining fertility rates. It will be rated PG. Katya Echeverri is a citizen astronaut, electrical engineer, the first Mexican-born woman to travel to space. She will tell us about how she's preparing young people to carry out advanced study in the fields of space, planetary science, protection of the planet. She'll talk about what cities can learn from young leaders pursuing moonshot innovations in cities right here on Earth. And then we'll hear from Juan Ramon de la Fuente, who joined President Sheinbaum's cabinet as foreign secretary this October, also one of the founders of Aspen Mexico, and he will discuss Mexico's foreign policy and how cities can help. All of this adds up to a great opportunity for us to learn together and partner. We are here with people who are on the cutting edge of innovation and solutions. Thank you all for being here. And now join me in welcoming our first panel. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Eduardo from the Washington Post, and I have here with us Enrique Peñalosa, 2 times mayor of Bogotá in Colombia, and equally important, if not more, author of Equality in the City, about what he wants to talk to us about today, in where he proposes that cities can be designed to mitigate the rampant income inequality that is part of this time. Now, we're all sitting here in a country where 1% of the population reaps over a quarter of the nation's income. So I think it is a very important subject to address, particularly here in Mexico City. And so, Enrique, my first question to you would be, how can cities help? When one hears about, responses to income inequality, one normally thinks of redistribution, taxing the rich to give money to the poor. It's not about how you design a city. But evidently, the use of public space can also contribute to equality and mitigate against inequality. So tell us, how does this work?
Well, clearly, with the market economy, even if you can improve somewhat, there is income inequality. And cities can do much. And I would say there are 3 kinds of equality cities can build. One is leisure equality. I mean, it's during leisure time when inequality is most felt, not so much during sleep time or work time, but when people go into a leisure. So a great city, rich and poor meet in great public spaces, in sidewalks, in parks, ideally in transport. Another kind of equality is what I would call a quality of life equality, that everybody should have access to green, to sports facilities, to music lessons without being wealthy. And the third kind of equality is what I would call democratic equality. All constitutions say that all citizens are equal before the law. If that is so, then also public good prevails over private interest. And so that's so powerful that you can even use eminent domain to take over a golf course, to buy it, of course, to do a public park. Or if all citizens are equal, a bus with 150 passengers has a right to 150 times more road space than a car with 1. Or someone in a bicycle has the right to the same amount of road space as the one in the car, or a pedestrian has the right to the same amount of road space as somebody in a car. This sounds theoretical, but it can be very powerful.
So tell us, in fact, about how this works in practice. I mean, you were mayor of Bogotá twice, and so you implemented some of these ideas. So tell us how it worked in practice.
Well, it's, for example, I had a war. I was almost impeached. I had my hair black before this. For doing something that seems very obvious, getting cars off the sidewalks or where there should be sidewalks. Because, of course, in developing countries, and at that time, even more so in '98, those with cars were only the wealthiest minority, and those who walk mostly tend to be lower-income citizens. So it's a war to get public space for people. Also, so we did something that had never been done there. We did bikeways, even much before New York or Paris. And again, we created a network of bikeways, protected bikeways, more than 250 kilometers long at that time. And today, in Bogotá, we have more than 1 million bicycle trips per day. Again, I was not thinking in the environment. Great if it's good for that, but it's because we were trying to, the bikeway shows that a citizen on a $100 bicycle is equally important to one in a car. We also created the BRT, the Transmillennial Bus System, based again in this principle, and now it moves 2.5 million people daily and is
being increased by more than 60%. We did also some land reform, urban land reform. We did housing projects intervening land in the two times I was mayor for around 500,000 people. Clearly, this land issue is very important. And we even did things like turning the polo fields and the riding facilities of the most exclusive country club in the country into a public park.
I mean, these things sound great, but they also sound incredibly politically difficult. And so, I mean, I guess my next question would be, how do you build the political consensus to battle against kind of like power structures that are not going to like the golf course to be turned into a park, like the NIMBYism that one sees in many cities where even very progressive and liberal communities resist construction that will bring perhaps poor people into their communities. There's a very great recent example of the other city in which I live, which is in New York, where there was this plan called congestion pricing. They took years to put it together. It was a fantastic plan to charge people to go into New York City, into Manhattan, with their car, and they would use the money from that fee to invest in public transport. Well, they finally got a deal, and weeks before it was going to be implemented, the Democratic governor of New York nixed it. And why did she nix it? Because she needed 5 congressional seats in suburban New York in this coming election. And the suburban voters around New York City hated congestion pricing. So this was, I mean, really a massive upset in a very liberal city. So if New York can't do this kind of stuff, what can anybody else do?
Well, it was very difficult at first. Huge war. Now in Bogotá, nobody would question that wherever possible, you have to create an exclusive bus lane because it is more efficient, more democratic. But of course, we lost many battles. I only told you about the ones we won. For example, we were going to do some park around a nearby reservoir with a bikeway, where there were many country houses of upper-income people, and they were able to manipulate, let's not go into the details, the environmental agency to block this part because they did not want the people going in bicycles in front of their homes. Or we were going to do this, Bogotá has some beautiful mountains alongside it, and to put a walkway along the mountains, and the upper-income people didn't want the lower-income people who have homes next to the mountains walking through the neighborhoods on the way to the mountain path, so they were able also to. I would say there are many ways to construct equality that do not imply conflict. Like, for example, when we build beautiful libraries or cultural and sports centers in low-income neighborhoods, they construct equality, or beautiful schools. We made a lot of schools, the hundreds of parks, but they are not difficult. But perhaps I think the most important ones are those that imply battles, conflict. And that's, but I would say what I try to say in my book is that one of the biggest obstacles to creating a better city is inequality. And also a good city constructs equality. I think, for example, that the Netherlands has much more bicycle users than Italy or Spain, or especially much earlier, not just because it's more level, but also because it's a more egalitarian society. And so it has been easier for wealthy and powerful people to use bicycles always and to give priority to bikeways. So this is I would say, equality can be a very powerful criteria to judge whether a city is a good one or not so good one.
So before the trapdoor opens and we're sent into another dimension, let me squeeze in a last question here. I think your most important recommendation is about the future. You make this observation in your book that about 80% of the urban space that we'll be living in the year 2100 has not yet been built. It will be built from now to then in Africa and Asia mainly. So what can we learn from how we've built cities so far to make this a more egalitarian kind of project?
It's extremely exciting. For the last 50 years of my life, I have worked in cities, and what happened in my lifetime in Mexico or in Colombia, the urbanization process, is exactly what is happening in some Asian countries, especially in Africa. I mean, the African cities are going to grow 20 times over the next 40, 50 years. And I think Latin America has so much to teach them, not for what we did right, but for what we did wrong, so that they can avoid all these mistakes. One great advantage they have is much of the land is publicly owned. For example, they could have cities with thousands of kilometers of greenways, crisscrossing them in all directions, or many roads only for buses or bicycles. They could do a completely different urban design that could make cities better than anything else that has been built in the world so far.
Well, we hit it right on the money. Well, thank you so much, Enrique.
Thank you.
Perfecto.
Thank you, Eduardo.
Hello. If everyone could please put on their translation headsets, that would be fabulous. They should be on your seat. While you do that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. I host a podcast about love from the New York Times. It's called Modern Love. And because of that, oh, thank you. Wow, so nice. Thank you. Because of that, I see cities through the specific lens of my work. I see them as these deep webs of relationships. And today I'm thrilled to talk to two people who are thinking through the ways that a city can become a love story. Sang-Jin, the mayor of Songnam, South Korea, and Daphne Lundy, a public scholar at the City College of New York. Welcome, you two. I want to begin with you, Mayor. You've started a government-run matchmaking program for single people in Songnam called Solomon's Choice. That's a play on the word solo, which is a fun way of referring to single people in South Korea. You have a video that explains what Solomon's Choice is all about, so let's watch that.
저는 좋은 기회라고 생각하고 이런 사업이 다른 곳에도 꼭 필요하다고 생각합니다.
All right, so Mayor, what gave you the idea to start Solomon's Choice? I know it was a very personal origin story for you.
저희 딸이 둘이 있는데 34, 32살입니다. 근데 자기 일에 바빠가지고 이성을 만날 시간이 잘 없고 그래서 아빠로서 걱정이 되는데 우리 한국은 저출산이 너무 심각합니다. 출생률이 0.72 이렇게 돼가지고 또 우리 한국에서 저출생 극복을 위한 많은 노력들이 있는데 아주 큰 성과들을 못 보고 있어요. 그래서 제가 국회의원 때도 그런 이야기를 많이 했는데 우리 시장이 돼가지고 도시 차원에서 이러한 저출생 문제를 국가적인 과제를 도시 차원에서도 한번 해결해보자 해서 저희 딸한테 힌트를 얻고 좀 더 강력하게 이 솔로몬의 선택 정책을 이제 밀어붙이고 만들었습니다.
You are, oh yeah, oh yes.
이거 하나 드릴까요?
You have something for us?
Anna Martin.
Thank you so much. These are the name tags they use at Solomon's Choice events.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I will wear this for the rest of my time here. You're a very good dad. That's a beautiful origin story. So you mentioned some statistics in this video, but South Korea has the world's lowest fertility rate at 0.72 in 2023, and Solomon's Choice events are part of a larger initiative to increase the number of marriages and therefore births in South Korea more broadly. And there have been critics to this approach, people who say that the obstacles to marriage or having kids are much more structural or cultural, such as long work hours that prevent people from leisure time to date or inadequate maternity leave. What would you say to those perspectives?
물론 이 만남의 기회가 주어지면은 결혼율이 높아지고 출생률이 크게 개선된다고 그렇게 꼭 단정할 수는 없죠. 이 결혼율이 낮고 출생률이 낮은 것은 결국은 사회, 문화, 경제적인 복합적인 문제라고 봅니다. 우리 성남시티는 서울에 인접한 바로 붙은 도시인데 저희는 주거비가 굉장히 높고 또 장시간의 또 근로, 노동 그리고 보육 문제라든가 또 집 여러 가지 문제가 쌓여 있기 때문에 그런 것을 해결을 총체적으로 종합적으로 해결해 나가야 되지만 그래서 저희가 시에서 우선 청춘 남녀의 만남의 장을 도시에서 해결해 준다면 또 이것이 성남에서 하고 또 전국적으로도 많이 여러 도시에서 점점 하게 됐습니다. 그래서 전국적으로 이러한 청춘 남녀의 만남이 많이 이루어진다면 결혼에 대한 인식 개선과 또한 결혼율이 좀 높아지는 그래서 출생 문제를 저출산 문제를 해결할 수 있는 이러한 이제 하나의 방법으로서 할 뿐입니다. 예. 물론 복합적인 문제죠.
An incremental approach. Before I go to you, Daphne, I have to ask, in that video we just saw, was that you at the first marriage for the Solomon's Choice couple? Were you the guest of honor? What was that like?
예, 작년 11월에 그 행사에 참여한 남녀가 올해 7월 7일 날 결혼식을 했습니다. 첫 커플이. 그리고 9월 7일에도 또 두 번째 결혼식이 있었는데 상당히 기쁘죠. 그리고
와우.
이러한 솔로몬의 선택이 하나의 성과로서 아주 열매를 맺는 그런 거기 때문에 좋았고 기뻤고 앞으로 현재 저희가 작년에만 460 쌍이 미팅을 했어요. 그러니까 그 참여한 사람들 중에 한 40% 이상이 커플이 돼서 계속 연애를 하고 있어요. 그런 가운데
와우.
저희가 설문조사를 했더니 그 중에 한 78%는 결혼할 의사를 서로 가지고 있는. 그래서 앞으로 우리 한국의 문화는 결혼을 해야 아기를 낳는 그렇게 결혼 안 하고 아기를 낳는 율은 4.7%밖에 안 돼요. 유럽 같은 데는 결혼 안 하고도 아기를 낳는 경우가 제가 알기로 45%이기 되는데 우리 한국의 문화는 결혼이 꼭 출산의 확실한 전 단계죠. 그래서 결혼율을 높이는 게 중요한데 결혼하려고 생각하는 청춘 남녀가 많다는 거 굉장히 긍정적인 효과라고 봅니다.
You got to get the tux ready. You have a lot of weddings upcoming, it sounds like. Daphne, let's talk. You have a background in urban planning and climate policy, and you co-created the project Romantic Urbanism, which I am fascinated by. Tell me what the origin story is there.
Yeah, well, first, the project really started from a love of romantic comedies. And my collaborator and I, Louise Young, she's also an urban planner, and in the early days of the pandemic, both of us were pulled into emergency response for the city of New York. And one of the ways that we would find to make community and support each other was watching romantic comedies and sharing meals and connecting and finding that as a place of respite. And so we started to think about romantic comedies specifically because they're really unique as a genre. They're a genre that focuses on women mostly, and they also focus on how women navigate space. And so it started from this sort of like lighthearted look at romantic comedies, but then it expanded even further. And you can take a movie like Rye Lane, which in my opinion is one of the best recent romantic comedies that has been made, so you should check it out.
Hot take, okay, great.
Hot take, or warm take, tender take. But then you can take a film like that and see how through them navigating South London, specifically Brixton, you're learning about their relationship, but you're also learning about a unique part of Black London as well. And so that sort of started us thinking about other ways that we can sort of revisit sort of urbanism tropes through this lens of romantic comedies and romantic urbanism in general. And for folks that are from the urban planning space, they're likely familiar with Kevin Lynch and the 5 elements of cities. And we started to sort of break these apart and sort of focus them on this idea of love. And so you could take a landmark, and we think about landmarks as a building, a tower, a site, and we could start to ask ourselves, what are the landmarks of your most significant relationships? If you're trying to introduce somebody to your city, what would you show them? And I think for some people it might be the Eiffel Tower if they're Parisian and they have a connection to the Eiffel Tower. But I think more often than not, you'll find that the landmarks are these mundane civic spaces.
Right.
So the bench where you had your first kiss, or the park where you met your best friend. So it becomes this deeper exploration of love.
Totally, or the bridge where you cried after your breakup, which is a personal thing. You've been there.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
So something I really love about this concept of romantic urbanism is that it doesn't privilege romantic love over other types of love, right? Family, friendship, neighborly love. Can you talk about how those different types of love are important to your work and why it's important to approach this kind of non-hierarchical position?
Yeah, I reflect on my own experience as a native New Yorker, and there are many things about my life that were shaped by romantic relationships, but my life was equally shaped by the friends I made, the family I had, the way they supported me through different phases of my life. And so when we think about sort of the infrastructure that supports people, yes, it's having potentially a romantic partner, but it's also important to have friends and community support. And so that's why it's been really exciting to develop this work over the past year plus. And something that we did over Valentine's Day was that we did a call for projects, romantic urbanism projects, and we got 80 respondents from around the world. And so over the next couple of years, we're developing essays, public activations, and art that really touches on this theme of romantic urbanism. So 2 pieces really excited about. One is a piece exploring paratransit and the ways that people with mobility issues use paratransit and form communities in that space. And another piece that we're interested in is bodegas, and thinking about bodegas as care infrastructure, where you buy medicine for a sick friend, or where you buy things to prepare a dinner.
Right.
So thinking about those different pieces. And to make a small plug, if you're in New York City, next Sunday, we're doing a Department of Tenderness, which is a speculative government office.
How cool.
Perhaps they should talk to you, Mayor Shin, to think about ways to really get people thinking about love and public space. So we'll be doing that next week.
Wait, tell us a little bit more. So it's in New York on Sunday. You're going to have these signs put places.
Yes, it's going to be New York, Sunday, October 20th, Kensington Plaza. And this speculative office is meant to have people think about ways to reshape streets and other spaces through this lens of romantic urbanism. So our sister agency is NYC-DOT, Department of Transportation. So we're riffing off of that structure, but we're using that as a space for people to think about love landmarks, to think about ways that transportation shapes relationships, but really using this idea of speculative bureaucracy to start a conversation about love in cities.
We should have put some of these signs up around here, huh? That would be fun to have a hug station at this conference. All right, I want to ask questions to both of you just to close us out. With both of your work, you're thinking about sort of broad-scale solutions for what some might consider personal problems, right? Loneliness, trying to find your person. Why is it important to approach these more so-called personal issues from a broad, citywide level? I'll start with you, Mayor.
네. 저희는 솔로몬의 선택 같은 것도 하나의 방법인데 도시에서 외로운 사람들이 많고 또 저희 성남시 같은 경우는 1인 가구, 혼자 사는 사람들의 그런 공동 취미생활 이런 걸 할 수 있게끔 우리 시 차원에서 1인 가구 지원 센터를 만들어서 지금 운영하고 있습니다. 굉장히 만족도가 좋고 같이 와서 공유 음식도 만들고 또 같이 영화도 보고 이러는 외로움을 달래는 그래서 도시에서 지방 정부에서 할 수 있는 일이 여러 가지 있겠지만 그 굉장히 인위적일 수도 있지만 그런 만남의 장소 또 서로 교류의 장소 그런 기회 제공을 해주는 게 이 도시로서 필요한 일이라고 생각을 합니다.
Thank you. And Daphne, what do you think?
Yeah, one thing I'd offer is a bit of a reframing. I think something that we're experiencing now is the fact that a lot of policies are personal. They shape our lives, they shape how we feel. And you know, I'm reflecting on what Mayor Brugada offered earlier today, this idea of care infrastructure. And I think another word for care is love. And so to the extent that we care about how residents of cities love, whether it's romantic or friendship or through family, ensuring that they're able to do that is also another way to ensure that their well-being, their mental health is looked out for. And so I think it's part of the different types of infrastructures that policymakers, planners have to think about when they want to make sure their citizens are okay.
Love is just as important. Okay, I actually I'm going to do one more question. So I ask this question on my podcast a lot. It's very broad, but I know you guys can roll with it. Through the work that you do, both of you, what do you think you've learned about love? I'm going to switch it up and start with Daphne.
Yeah, I and many other people reread Bell Hooks' All About Love in the middle of the pandemic. And I think something through this work and her work I'm reminded of is this idea of love as action, love as a verb. It's something that we have to constantly work on. And I liken it to the work of policymaking and city making. If we think about care as an action, if we think about love as an action, we realize that it's something that we have to continue to shape and work on and focus on.
Love as an action. And what about you, Mayor?
사랑은 뭐 생명이고 또 우리 인간 사회를 지탱해주는 가장 큰 핵심 포인트라고 생각해요. 그런 사랑이 또 지금 도시의 주제로 봤을 때는 그런 사랑으로 연결된 그런 다양한 형태의 그런 존재 양식, 그런 형태가 결국은 우리 도시도 유지해주고 또 도시를 발전시키는 원동력이 되고 거기에서 많은 정책들이 결국은 우리 도시를 더 풍부하게 하고 도시 간의 유대 이런 것들도 더 가능하게 하고 국가 간의 유대 이런 것도 더 가능하게 해주는 게 결국은 그 뿌리는 사랑이다 이렇게 생각을 해요.
I couldn't have put it better myself. Thank you so much, everyone. Let's fall in love today. Thank you.
Hello. Hi. How are you? I hope you are having a good time here in Mexico City. My name is Atenea. I'm the Executive Digital Editor for Vogue Mexico and Latin America. And I'm very excited to be here with Katia Chazarreta. We are going to have a conversation about innovation. And I don't know, I'm very excited about this. So I'm just going to go right to the point. So, Katia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
So, CityLab is about innovation in cities. We are here today to talk about how you are bringing an interest in scientific innovation to women and girls across Latin America, and how cities can help. You work on 5 NASA missions as an electrical engineer, and are the first Mexican-born woman in space on a mission to provide space-related opportunities for Latin America. In 2022, you were selected out of 7,000 people from 120 countries to travel to space. Let's take a look at what that moment was for you.
I love my face. I think my face is the funniest part.
So, Katia, tell us, how did going to space impact your interest in innovation?
Well, I think ever since I was a little girl, I've just been completely and absolutely fascinated by technology and science. Sometimes we don't necessarily have the words to describe that when we're young. But as I started growing up, it just was a recurring theme for me throughout my life. So my biggest goal and my biggest dream since elementary school was to be able to participate on NASA missions and just be a part of the space industry. And innovation, of course, comes with that because all of the amazing technology that we've been able to create thanks to that space exploration, the way that it trickles down into our own planet is something that is just so, so exciting for me. So just yesterday, for example, we had the launch of Europa Clipper, which is an orbiter that is going to investigate Jupiter's moon Europa. This was actually my very first NASA mission as an electrical engineer, where I was actually working on this for years, full time. So that moment was just so bittersweet, knowing that so many years of work went into that, and just to watch it go, to watch it soar is such a beautiful, beautiful experience. But, I mean, I've been lucky enough that I've been able to not only watch my own technology go to space, but also launch off to space myself. So I know what Europa Clipper felt yesterday.
How did your own interest in space and engineering start?
So this is actually a really funny story. I, of course, always felt it. I like to say that I was born like this. But I remember going to a science museum when I was very young. I was in elementary school. And they essentially had a simulation of what a career in the space industry would be. So we all showed up, they gave us a test, and they placed us into different areas. I remember you could be either placed as an engineer, as a scientist, mission control, or an astronaut for a mission to Mars. And all of this was, of course, different puzzle pieces coming together for this mission to Mars. And I remember being so sad. I had to hold in my tears, and it was a mix of sad and really pissed off, just in that way that an elementary school child can be, because I was not selected as an astronaut that day. I was placed as a scientist, and my role was to analyze some of these samples coming from Mars for the first time. And at the end of that, despite not being the astronaut for the mission, I was just so happy. And my mom was actually a chaperone that day. So she comes out with me after that. And I think she saw that I was just very pensive. And she asked me if I was okay. And I said, I can't believe that you can work with things that are from space. You can build things that are going to space. You can go to space yourself, and they'll pay you money for that. I think I know what I want to do with my life.
Well, now your passion lies not just in space and science, but also in spreading an interest in innovation among women and other underrepresented groups. As will be made possible by your foundation, Fundación Espacial. How are you creating interest in science and space?
Well, so my organization, Fundación Espacial, is an organization that is born shortly after my mission to space. So I started my career as a NASA engineer. I've been a space engineer all my life, which people always laugh when I say that because I'm not even 30 years old yet. But this has been my life. Space has been my life, my entire life. And after my mission, truthfully, I was not expecting to be selected. Something that I always say is when you apply for a mission to space, the last thing you expect is to go to space. What you're actually expecting is a rejection and a try again next time, because you understand the competition, you understand just the magnitude of what it means that less than 700 people have traveled to space ever. And there are billions of people on this planet. But not only the people that are currently on this planet right now, how many people have existed in the history of humanity? And I actually did the math one time, and my calculator just showed 0.0000 and ran out of digits before getting to that one for the percentage of what that actually represents. So when I come back from my mission, I really went through this really difficult time in my life because I'm coming back to Latin America. I was born in Mexico, and I have children, I have scientists, I have engineers, people with that sparkle in their eye asking me, how can I do what you've done? And I know that the answer is complicated, because if I'm going to tell them the truth is, if you were born here, if you study here, if you stay here, if you work here, you can't do it. That's the true answer. But in that moment, I realized there can be a different answer, but that different answer requires me to make a choice. So I did. And I decided not to go back to my job at NASA. I decided to start working to create space infrastructure for Mexico. When I started with this work 2 years ago, I was told that it was absolutely ridiculous and that I should just go back to the career I had worked for my entire life. I decided that I didn't care because I wanted that answer to be different. I don't think that it's fair, that it's pretty much like a lottery, whether you get to live out your goals and dreams or not, based on whether where you were born has the opportunities that you're looking for. So that is why we created this organization. And in the last 2 years, we've been able to not only approve a constitutional reform in Congress with the support of all of the parties to prioritize space activities in Mexico for the first time in history, to write, thank you. And to write all of the laws necessary within 180 days, that part is very important because we got to put a time limit, to regulate the space industry. So what this is going to mean for the future of this nation is that we are not going to recognize it in the next 5 to 10 years. And that's just one of the parts of what we focus on with this organization. And then the other aspect is, okay, great, we're opening up the doors for a space industry within Mexico. How do we make sure that the people that are taking advantage of these opportunities are the people who are living, studying, and working here? And so we're also working on many different training and preparation programs so that the people of Mexico are going to be able to take those jobs once they become available.
Well, Katia, thank you so much for sharing this with us today. We're so excited for having you here. And thank you for all the work that it's been done in the last couple of years.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you're enjoying Mexico.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for attending this very important talk, perhaps the most important talk of all day, I will say. We had some words this morning from the mayor of Mexico City about the challenges with water here, but what we have gathered for this panel is a terrific group of people dealing with their own challenges with water in different parts of the world with slightly different solutions that I think are really interesting across the board. So we'll get straight into it. We have too many people, too little time, and I will have you introduce yourselves, tell us where you're from, and the challenges that you've been facing.
Sure. Well, I'm Lauren McLean. I serve as the mayor of Boise, Idaho. We are a city that's a high desert city, nestled in between foothills of the Rockies, have a river running through it, and we are the most isolated city of our size in our country. Our challenges, like cities around the country, around the world, are that we want to make sure that as one of the fastest growing cities in the United States, that we're prepared for a climate-constrained future, and that we can have ensure that we're set up for economic opportunity for our residents. And water is a big part of that. We don't own or operate our drinking water system, but we look to our water renewal system, a lot of people call it the sewer system, for solutions for the future.
Thank you so much. I'm Engineer Nation Mangi Moguna, responsible for provision of water and storage services in Nairobi, Kenya. Nairobi is a city of around 5 million people. Water supply is provided by a company which is owned by the county government of Nairobi. The way it is in Kenya, we have two levels of governance, the national and the county government. So the county government is the second tier of governance and is the owner of the company which manages water and sewerage services. Now, the city has been experiencing water supply problems. The city is only able to produce around 59% of the water demand. The water demand is around 900,000 cubic meters. And what the installed production capacity can be able to achieve is 525,000 cubic meters of water per day. Thank you so much.
Yo voy a hablar en español primero, así que si quieren poner el canal ahí en. Mi nombre es Mauricio Zunino, soy el intendente de Montevideo, en Uruguay, ciudad que hasta hace unos pocos años hablar de crisis del agua en Uruguay parecía una cosa utópica, rara, sobre todo teniendo en cuenta la densidad que hay de agua tanto superficial como subterránea, pero ya a partir de hace 2 años tuvimos una crisis bastante importante con el sistema de abastecimiento y esto tiene que ver también con los procesos de cambio climático que venimos sufriendo, alertando. Y como Intendencia de Montevideo tuvimos que hacernos en buena medida generar políticas para hacernos cargo de suministrar, sobre todo en aquellos espacios más vulnerables, en aquellos hogares más vulnerables, la posibilidad del acceso al agua potable cuando no teníamos o cuando quedamos en crisis ahí. Y eso también nos tiene que llevar a pensar que esto, que era una cuestión poco prevista o rara para lo que podía ser Montevideo, efectivamente hoy nos prepara para pensar las inversiones a mediano y largo plazo, las acciones preventivas, las acciones mitigatorias que tenemos que efectivamente hacer. No dije, pero Montevideo es una ciudad de un entorno de 1.400.000 habitantes. Presentado.
Gracias. So, I mean, we're all sharing this warming climate. We're having these droughts that are exacerbating. We are finding different solutions to this, though. What tools are at our disposal in these different parts of the world? I'm particularly interested in yours. I've written before about water purification, the technology being to the point now where it comes out so pure when you're treating wastewater that you have to put minerals back into it or it's unhealthy. It's this really fascinating technology. You're not doing potable, but talk to us about how you're deploying this technology.
Sure, and I want to step back just a tiny bit because our job, our city's desire is to prevent crisis, and so we're looking at preparing for a more resilient future and looking to solutions to prevent crisis in the long run. And so we actually went to the people. We said, these are the likely challenges. These are some solutions that we have. And we had conversations throughout the city, thousands of conversations, to get feedback on a plan that we created, our Water Renewal Resource Plan. Sent it to the ballot. We did a $570 million bond that was for clean water and climate action, and about 82% of Boise residents said yes. And with that approval, we were able then to get real about a water recycling program. Because we don't have our drinking water, we knew we couldn't do it there. But so we looked at how we could actually work in partnership, ultimately, provide solutions to companies that are looking for climate hedges and climate resilience as well, and wanted a clean water solution for their manufacturing. So with that bond approval, we've actually purchased land. The last year and a half, we've been doing a pilot in the parking lot of Micron Corporation in cooperation with the University of Idaho, so water specialists. We even give tours to the public of this facility to look at how it works. We're tracking data. We are touring the public, and we're tweaking the system. And now we've purchased the land and have started building the facility that will take, dirty water and recycle it super clean in a way that we can actually then provide it to fabs and other manufacturing facilities or industrial facilities. So our drinking water that's privately held by Veolia can be there to drink, and we can take dirty water, make it really clean, and provide it for jobs.
This is actually a really interesting through line to what you all are doing here, which is the engagement with the public. You can't go about deploying these solutions without talking to the people first. Maguna and Mauricio, I think maybe if you wanted to talk here about the ways that you organize people around water usage, going from there, going forward, are you engaging more with the public as the world generally tends to dry out?
No, thank you so much. Now, as I said, the demand of water is quite high compared to the supply. So what we did is we divided the city into 4 corridors so that we can be able to channel water particular hours to various customers along the 4 corridors. Now, within a week, we are able to pressurize every corridor properly so that people can get enough water to store in their houses and use that water. Now, the water in the city lands into 4 locations. So we modeled it based on the major arteries, major pipelines, which distribute water in the city. And we prepared a program which we normally call equitable water distribution. This program was given to the customers. They were informed how we shall be operating the systems. So every customer knows the day they are supposed to receive their water, the hours they are supposed to receive the water. And we make sure we follow that program so that the day you are supposed to have water, you have water in your house. And it has really worked because of communicating to the customers. We keep on communicating with the customers. If there is any breakdown, we communicate to them, telling them this particular day you won't have water. We won't be able to change the program. We don't give you the water this particular day. And it has really worked because if you come to Nairobi, you won't realize there is not enough water because you won't see a tanker easily. The city lands well, but it is based on that equitable distribution program. Now, again, in the areas where the customers, most vulnerable customers live, we ensure they get water 24/7 to avoid breakdown of any waterborne diseases. When I'm talking about the less fortunate people, it's the informal settlements where the poor lives in the city. So we ensure those areas get water 24/7. The areas where most of you live, we make sure they get less water because you can be able to have storage capacities within your compounds. People who live in apartments, again, we make sure we take adequate water to those apartments, the hours they are supposed to be getting the water. And as I've said, it really works for us. Now, what are we doing to solve that problem? Because of the way the structures of water and governance in the country are, the national government is responsible for the development of water sources and development. And it has taken over 25 years before the last water source was developed. That's back 1997. We are now in 2024. You can imagine the population growth. For the water which we are using to serve the city was supposed to serve the city up to the year 2000. After 2000, we were supposed to develop new sources, but that has not been done. It is in the process of being done. Very soon, we are going to be commissioning new systems to hand additional water to the city of around 160,000 cubic meters per day, which will just bridge the gap. So regional or equitable water distribution will still continue to be applied to the city residents of Nairobi. Thank you so much.
Bien, en lo que a nosotros un poco respecta, si bien la Intendencia de Montevideo como gobierno local no es el encargado del suministro del sistema de agua, cuando nos encontramos con la falta de abastecimiento, producto básicamente de 3 años de sequía y demás, lo que vimos era que era necesario que la Intendencia actuara en términos de cómo llevar adelante un proceso de distribución de la misma sobre todo llevando un formato de agua embotellada traída desde otros lugares y distribuida sobre todo en hogares más vulnerables. Ese fue un poco el plan que efectivamente un poco muestra la lámina de ahí, que tiene que ver con algunas distribuciones que efectivamente estuvimos haciendo en Montevideo. Y esto lo pudimos hacer también en base a que teníamos algunos otros planes que no tenían que ver con el agua, pero que nos ayudaron a ver hacia dónde canalizarla. Uno es el plan de datos abiertos general que tenemos a nivel de intendencia y la localización y la caracterización socioeconómica básicamente de la población. Entonces eso nos permitía saber dónde teníamos mayores vulnerabilidades, tanto socioeconómicas como también en términos de salud, y eso nos permitía tener un avance hacia dónde canalizarlas. Lo segundo es mesas de trabajo que nos permitían discutir con las vecinas y los vecinos las posibilidades de llevar adelante estas acciones. Entonces, cuando vos te planteabas cómo llevar adelante un proceso de distribución que efectivamente tuviese esta característica, hacia dónde priorizabas, cómo trabajabas esa priorización, tenías los datos y además tenías las mesas barriales funcionando que te permitían también canalizar hacia dónde y hacia qué hogares, hacia qué viviendas efectivamente hacías el sistema de distribución. Eso nos permitió en buena medida ser mucho más eficientes en términos de la distribución, sobre todo la inmediata, y hacer que esta cuestión del agua no se transformara, o la crisis de abastecimiento de agua potable a través de los grifos, no terminara siendo una crisis sanitaria, una crisis por otro sentido, debido a, digamos, a una rápida actuación por este proceso, de tener datos y tener espacios básicamente barriales donde efectivamente conversemos con los vecinos y distribuyamos ese poder a partir de esa distribución.
And speaking of distribution, I was curious also about maybe any other infrastructural changes that you are considering. I'm a big fan of sponge cities, this idea that you build out green infrastructure that soaks up water into underlying aquifers, beyond treating wastewater. Are there ways both on a city scale that we can do more green spaces, but also on maybe a household scale with rain catchment systems, so we can just lessen the demand on the water infrastructure to begin with?
Well, what we've looked at in Boise is, and in my mind, it all goes back to people. Our residents want us to lead. They know, and so often they're ahead of politicians on understanding and wanting to see resiliency measures taken. We have a climate action plan, and our clean water work is a big part of that. But we're also looking at, as you mentioned, nature-based solutions. So I'll talk about that probably over the household part of the question. We have as a goal to double our tree canopy by 2030. That'll cool the neighborhood. It doesn't necessarily impact water. But in addition to doubling the tree canopy in our city by 2030, we've committed and actually already completed planting seedlings up in the national forest above our city. It's a headwater strategy. So planting 235,000 seedlings in the national forest above our city to protect water quality, water habitat as it comes downstream. Because in addition to groundwater, we rely on surface water. So looking at that. And have really partnered and called on our residents not only to help us meet our climate action goals, of course, but to take as many measures as they can themselves, while also participating in the work that we're doing to expand our water renewal system. One of my favorite parts is I really believe that if we're going to get residents to take action, I don't have all the tools that a lot of cities have in a Dillon rule state, but if we're going to partner with residents and get them to take action, we've got to engage them from the beginning. And as I mentioned early, engagement to get to the point where we had a plan and success and buy-in from residents was key. But when we started this water pilot project, I actually had to meet the mayor out at this facility. It was one of the hottest days we'd had in the summer. Our days are getting hotter, so it was over 100 degrees in a parking lot in metal containers. I show up, and I thought nobody in their right mind is actually going to make the drive and come out here. I had about 35 residents show up that wanted to learn about water recycling and also wanted to learn about what they could do at home, moms with babies, college students, residents, retirees, a whole plethora of folks
that want to be part of the solution. We're curious about what we're doing. We're taking that interest and turning it into individualized action while also connecting them with volunteer opportunities to help with our nature-based solutions that we have both in the headwaters and in restoring natural lands in our parks throughout our city.
We have a little over a minute left. My apologies. If you had some final thoughts there about additional infrastructure before we close out.
No, thank you so much. As I said, the government is investing heavily in development of new water sources for the city. And notwithstanding that, we, as the county government, we encourage the people to use low volume systems. Instead of the 9 liter, you use the 6 liter systems. Also, we inform the customers or the residents on water saving tips, avoiding using running taps, avoiding running showers, so that they can use as little as possible to avoid, so that your neighbor also can get water. And then also we encourage them to not water their glasses a lot, those who have big compounds. So we encourage people to save water a lot until when we get adequate water, when the new sources are developed. But notwithstanding the climate change, the investments are actually very heavy because at the moment you cannot tap the water direct from the rivers or running rivers. You must do dams so that you can be able to take care of the climate changes. These days, every 4 years, you find the river flows going down tremendously, so they cannot be able to sustain the obstructions of low water to your treatment plants. Thank you so much.
You want to close this out? Yeah.
Sí, muy rápido, pues ya sé que estamos en tiempo, pero bueno, yo creo que lo que necesitamos es pensar en una lógica de 2 plazos temporales, pensar como gobiernos en acciones mitigatorias que aborden la problemática climática y en particular el tema del agua como uno de los principales problemas o afectaciones que tienen que ver con lo climático y pensar en una dinámica de mirada de más largo plazo que nos vaya permitiendo ir haciendo esas soluciones estructurales que efectivamente necesitamos construir para poder tener una dinámica de vida mucho más sostenible y que no tengamos que tener paneles como la crisis del agua en estos eventos, sino que podamos contar cómo solucionamos efectivamente estos temas. Y creo que ese es un poco el deber que tenemos para estas instancias. Muchas gracias.
Lovely, positive way to close it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Can you walk this way?
Good afternoon. My name is Adam Freed, and I lead the sustainability practice at Bloomberg Associates, where I help mayors achieve their social, economic, and environmental goals, including on affordable housing. Now, before we dive into today's session, I want to do a quick poll. If affordable housing is a challenge in your city, please raise your hand. Wow. All right. Now, one other question. If it's one of your top issues, please put your hand up again. Just look around the room really quickly. Almost every hand in the room is up, which we thought was going to happen. As your hand showed, the availability of high-quality, affordable housing is an enormous challenge for cities around the world, regardless of their size or geography. But at CityLab, we like to focus on solutions. So we're here to share some incredible actions being taken by 5 local governments from around the world to create more housing for their communities. These rapid presentations, which span 4 continents, will hopefully spark your imagination and help you unlock opportunities in your cities. First up, we'll hear about a rapid housing initiative for residents experiencing homelessness in the United States. Please welcome Josh Humphreys, who serves as the mayor's policy advisor for housing in the city of Atlanta, Georgia.
It's great to be from Atlanta. T.I., the artist from that song, actually recently got into affordable housing, and we were at his grand opening just last year for his first affordable housing project. So we get a little bit of hip-hop and a little bit of affordable housing. When Mayor Dickens took office in 2022, he set a goal to build or preserve 20,000 units of affordable housing by 2030. Less than 3 years in, we're over halfway there with 10,000 units either completed or currently under construction. But typical housing construction takes 3 to 5 years to deliver. And for our unhoused residents, that simply isn't fast enough. So last year, we decided to push the envelope. We launched an effort to deliver 500 modular housing units for unhoused residents by the end of 2025. Our first project is called The Melody. In just 4 months, we transformed this city-owned parking lot into 40 permanent supportive housing units, complete with a dog park, community kitchen, and on-site laundry. This is what the site looked like in October of 2023. We built the units leveraging shipping containers and modular buildings. This enabled us to complete the site work at the same time that we were building the units off-site in a factory. Construction crews rallied around this vision to provide housing for our most vulnerable residents, working around the clock, day and night, and even through the holidays to make this happen. To pay for this project, the mayor issued an executive order that fully funded the entire initiative. Our bet was that delivering quality product quickly would open up the opportunities that we needed in order to meet the need that our residents had to deliver this project quickly. And our bet paid off. By February 2024, residents were moving in. So from October 2023 to February 2024, our residents were moving in. And just last month, Atlanta City Council passed a $60 million housing bond alongside a $60 million philanthropic raise to make sure that we can deliver our 460 remaining units by the end of next year. Our next project breaks ground later this month. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josh. And I'll note that the presentation Josh just gave is one of the ideas that's featured in the Bloomberg Cities Idea Exchange, so an opportunity to learn more. Now, are you guys ready for the next city, and we're ready to go? All right. Joining us from Namibia to share how they're upgrading informal settlements to create new and improved housing, please welcome Mayor Queen Kamadi of the city of Windhoek.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, Windhoek is the capital city of Namibia and its largest city. Windhoek continues to grow rapidly as migrants from across the country and the African continent seek a new home here. Over the past 10 years, our city's population has increased approximately 40% to more than 500,000 residents today. The big challenge is that many of our residents, close to 37%, live in the informal settlements, with limited or no access to infrastructure or basic services such as water or sanitation. As informal settlements continue to grow, we ask ourselves, what can we do to provide housing and basic services to so many people? Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, in 2019 and 2021, we passed new policies that enable the incremental upgrading of informal settlements and construction of affordable housing units. Today, we are proud to say we have already built units for 500 households and have an additional 800 to go by 2025 as part of our pilot project. With each new development, residents purchase the home and the land on affordable terms. For example, we upgraded the Onyeka informal settlement to a formalized settlement, which has provided over 150 low-income households with much-needed housing and municipal services. As another example, in Korea Hub Extension 4, we provided new housing to uniformed personnel residing in existing informal settlement. This project is part of the decongestion program of unplanned informal settlement, paving the way for upgrading of services and formalization of tenure. Projects like this have a positive impact on people's lives by guaranteeing security of tenure, quality municipal services, dignity, and many other benefits associated with stable housing. In conclusion, we aim to provide housing opportunities for 12,000 families by 2027, and I thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Kamadi. Now let's move to Europe to hear how policy and process improvements are making zoning changes easier and more impactful. Please join me in welcoming Jan Mazur, Head of Strategy for the city of Bratislava in Slovakia.
Hello, it's so good to be here. Housing affordability in the beautiful city of Bratislava has been in decline ever since the fall of communism. The city lost almost all of its housing stock in the 90s and 2000s. It hasn't been able to build enough public housing, and changes to zoning laws have been too slow. The result is that the affordability of both rental housing and home ownership continues to worsen. To counter this trend, we recently created upzoning policy, thanks to which changes to the master plan are faster and private developers contribute to the creation of public housing and public infrastructure. Because these changes to the master plan increase land values, the city has created a predictable, fair and transparent policy in which part of the profit from these developments is shared with the city through contribution. The policy is now fully adopted and used across the whole city. The pilot project yields 143 apartments, which are currently being built and will soon be provided to the city as affordable housing. This means an increase of over 16% of city-owned housing stock. An additional approximately 1,300 apartments are in the pipeline, and an additional 63 million euros have been secured for public investments in brownfield areas. The upzoning projects currently under consideration will almost triple the city's current housing stock, while allowing developers to provide additional housing to the market. And our takeaways: build policy that is fair, take developers as partners, and develop smart strategy ahead of changes to your master plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Now let's go to Chile, where they're increasing density to support multi-generational families and create vibrant communities. Here from the city of Renca, please welcome Deputy Mayor Julian Gallardo.
Thank you, Adam. I'm glad to be here. Well, in the 60s, Chile was a poor country. Because the government couldn't afford to provide the housing, it gave the urban poor a plot of land upon which to build their homes. The site and service scheme grew rapidly in the developing world, and thousands of sites on the outskirts of cities were self-built. Mrs. Juana's house in the city of Renca was one of them. Over the years, Mrs. Juana had children, and those children had children too, and so on. The problem was that as the family grew, their home remained almost the same. But they wanted and needed to stay together to survive economically, to maintain their family ties, and shared identity. In an urban sprawl model, providing Mrs. Juana's family more space would mean the destruction of this critical support network. Instead, Chile created the Pequeño Condominio micro-settlement program. On the same plot of land given to them in the 60s, Mrs. Juana's family now lives in 3 separate apartments of more than 60 square meters each. In this model, the family stayed together in a better home, and the city densifies instead of sprawling. But Mrs. Juana's family is not an isolated case. 6,000 plots just in Renca, and more than 200,000 in the greater Santiago could tell the same story. An expansion of this policy could end the entire housing shortage with no additional land consumption, making not only affordable housing, but sustainable cities and better lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Gallardo. And for our last great idea of the day, we'll shift to the county where I actually grew up. Here to talk about an innovative local funding mechanism creating high-quality public housing in the United States, please welcome Chelsea Andrews, President and Executive Director of the Housing Opportunities Commission for Montgomery County, Maryland.
Hello, thank you so much, Adam. It's so great to be here. Like many of you, our county, a diverse suburb with over 1 million residents, a diverse suburb of Washington, D.C. with over 1 million residents, has struggled to remain affordable despite deploying every tool imaginable to address housing affordability. To date, we have over 40,000 people on our waiting list. So in 2021, we worked with our council to create an innovative Kickstarter tool called the Housing Production Fund. The Housing Production Fund is an accelerating construction tool. Our council authorized $2.1 million in annual bond allocation that yielded $100 million in revolving fund for HOC to build mixed income housing, where market rate units subsidize affordable units, creating a more inclusive community, removing reliance on the private sector and ensuring long-term affordability. This revolving fund is one we project will help us build 6,000 units in the next 20 years. And after 20 years, the bonds will be paid off and we can continue to produce even more housing. We completed our first project, as you can see here, the Laureate in 2023, in just 2 years after the fund adoption. And I'm pleased to share that we just broke ground on our second development, Hillendale Gateway, last month. Necessity is the mother of invention. This fund, the quality of housing we're building, and the lives we're affecting is driving innovation across the country as others look to adopt the model in their own jurisdictions. HOC is not your average housing authority, and we are pretty darn proud of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. Now let's have another big round of applause for Atlanta, Windhoek, Bratislava, Renca, and of course, Montgomery County. Hopefully these ideas have inspired you. If you'd like to learn more about any of these programs or have a deeper conversation around housing, you can find our speakers on a break or join them tomorrow morning for coffee at the Affordable Housing Breakfast Chat at 7:45 a.m. in the lobby. Thank you so much for being here.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for being here. We have a very interesting conversation ahead of us. And I really like the name of this panel because it really opens very well the question of how to make smarter, greener cities by innovative funding ways. That's why we are here today. And maybe you all agree with me that there is a huge investment need right now and how cities can accomplish their proper goals for this. But what are the challenges? Which financial instruments are they getting into it? Is there plenty enough of financial needs? So we have 3 panelists today to discuss this with us, and that maybe they can help us clear some of these doubts. So welcome all. So Camila, I want to start with you because green municipal finance holds the promise to revolutionize city governance. Briefly, and in simple terms, please, for all of us, which are the trends right now when it comes to green financial instruments? Which are the ones being currently chosen by the cities? The most exciting ones. Which are they, and how do they work?
Okay, thank you, Jimena. So let me talk about two key trends that we're seeing at IFC, right? And which are becoming, I guess, the core of asks when we deal with municipal governments. The first one is sort of use of proceed financing. And what is that? That's basically blue, green, biodiversity loans or bonds, where actually the projects that you are financing have eligibility criteria to qualify under each of those categories. So for instance, a green loan or bond, the use of proceeds of those projects would be able to achieve climate and environmental targets. Blue, loans or bonds, ocean conservation, water management, water supply, biodiversity, projects where the use of proceeds of those projects are linked to biodiversity. So a lot of asks from our municipal clients to help them through structure, strategize around those products. The other one that is super exciting, and it's more recent, is target-driven loans or bonds. And that's basically use of proceeds can be broad and can be general, but client cities or municipalities will choose KPIs that are linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, the 2030 targets. So here we're talking about how to align those targets at the local level with those ambitious. And the interesting part is if the city complies with those ambitious targets that are measurable, that you can, in a way, validate, they get financial incentives, pricing a step up or a step down in the interest rate if they're achieved. So super exciting context and a lot of innovation in this space available to our clients.
Thank you very much, Camila. And David, please, can you comment on this? And also another question for you. Why do you think there is a newfound interest in municipal finance in developing countries?
So maybe starting with your final question, then I'll come back to complement. I think it's because there's a recognition that really local government finance is a form of development finance. And we really want to build that recognition. There's a book out called Local Government Finance is Development Finance. You can check it out. And it's a wide experiences from across the world, including some of the ones that you've talked about. And I think it's important that national policymakers understand that, particularly when it comes to climate, but not only climate, they can achieve their national goals through local government finance. Now, more specifically, onto your earlier question, one of the trends, I think, is trying to open up domestic capital markets. I was very privileged to have a conversation with the President of Tanzania about 2 or 3 years ago, and she said, try to do a domestic capital market bond for local infrastructure finance in Tanzania. We've not done this before, because the countries are borrowing and their balance sheets are full up. The cost of capital is increasing, but if you unlock that domestic capital market in domestic currency, you can actually find a different way around the situation. So just recently, the Tanga Urban Water and Sanitation Authority, the city of Tanga in Tanzania, launched the first ever in sub-Saharan Africa green infrastructure bond in local currency on the local stock exchange, following some of the examples that you talked about. And in fact, this week, it's going to be cross-listed in the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, which broadens and deepens the liquidity. So I think domestic capital markets is one. Just very quickly, a couple of other things. Equity funds, there's growing number of equity funds that are looking at cities, and that's important because they don't necessarily involve debt. So that can help, although it depends on the legal and regulatory requirements. There are also guarantee facilities for cities. So we're working with the European Union on the Sustainable City Guarantee Facility that will mitigate some of the issues that prevent ministries of finance from backing these projects because they're worried it'll affect their sovereign credit rating. And finally, with regard to intergovernmental fiscal transfers, there are some mechanisms like the local climate adaptive living facility that can use fiscal resources for local climate adaptation. Understanding that it's better to do it through local governments than through ministries of environment, because they are regulatory bodies, they're not doers. But the climate finance stays with them. The climate finance should be with the doers, who are the local governments.
Interesting. And also here we have Antha Williams. Welcome. As the environmental lead for Bloomberg Philanthropies, I believe you have a very good scan of where do you find the challenge when it comes for cities to reach out for this kind of green financing. Can you tell us more about it and what still needs to be done?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Jimena. Es un placer estar aquí. It's wonderful to be in Mexico City, so thank you very much. I don't think it's news to anyone here that cities are facing a lot of challenges, not least of which is the impacts of climate change now here that they're having to deal with. So in addition to all the budget pressures that we've heard and the services that mayors are on the hook to deliver, the impacts of climate change that we're seeing are worse and more costly than even the climate models anticipated. And so in that squeezed fiscal space and the reality that storms and droughts and heat waves are coming faster and more furiously, it just becomes a more urgent need to both build the infrastructure that's going to lower emissions while being climate smart to withstand what's coming at the exact same time. I think in addition, there are non-climate related challenges that many of the cities that we work with face. And again, I think those are well known to the group of people here. But for example, only 44% of countries in the world allow cities, local governments to borrow without sovereign guarantees or approvals. In addition, cities in the global south face a myriad of other challenges, including short tenor and high interest rates and all of those challenges. And so I think as we think at Bloomberg Philanthropies about the strategies within finance to help cities, we think both about the interesting models and mechanism and instruments, but also about the advocacy to help cities speak with one voice and get more fully included in the global discussions in national governments' climate plans, including investment plans. And we also work to convene and bring together investors with cities and figure out those platforms where pitches can happen. I think a couple places where we've seen new innovations that are exciting are within thinking about the city's existing budgets and revenues that is available. And one tool that I would point to on that to support climate goals and attract investment is climate budgeting, which a number of cities have now taken on. It's emerged as a tool for mayors to identify new sources of funding for climate smart infrastructure, but also to work laterally across agencies within a city. And so in examples like Oslo, where the city began to utilize the climate budgeting as a tool, it became clear that their own domestic construction was a major driver of emissions and also spending. They began to look at the procurement and other funds that they were putting towards construction and to align them in a climate smart way, and that just opened a whole set of new solutions and available funding for future-proof investments. And the City of London is doing some of the same things. They really said without the climate budgeting tool, they wouldn't have been able to do the solar wrapper on their Olympic stadium. So that's just one example. But I think exciting in the way that looks at what cities have in terms of available revenue today.
I see. Antha mentioned Oslo, London, but Camila, David, whoever wants to respond, you have worked already with other cities. What are the challenges? What were the innovative solutions with the ones you worked with?
I think these are really good examples that Antha talked about, and with regard to the climate budgeting, it's very important. The local climate adaptive living facility that I referred to is really for developing countries, but what it enables is the central government to get resources perhaps from the Green Climate Fund or the Adaptation Fund or some other global source of climate finance. But instead of spending that centrally, they then pass it to their local governments, who basically do a form of climate budgeting. and spend it locally. And it's been proved to be more effective in reducing climate risk because, in fact, who has the mandate and responsibility for most of climate adaptation, which is a public good, without which the private sector cannot work, is local governments. So it's the many, many, many thousands of little investments in drainage and that kind of thing that can be done better through local government. And then the mechanism has a kind of quality assurance to make sure the money is well spent. You also mentioned a couple of things which I think are critical, the short tenor, the sovereign approval required, and then the interest rates. And we hope that things like the Sustainable City Guarantee Facility will help to address the sovereign approval because it will provide more comfort. And then in terms of the tenor and the interest rates, I think this is a critical issue. I mean, the Tanga water bond that I mentioned, it was oversubscribed on the stock exchange of Dar es Salaam, but it was quite expensive, so it had to be a very viable project. So if you look at in the developed world, a lot of the critical infrastructure was 50-year bonds, 100-year bonds, very low rates. The London Underground, I think it was like a 70-year bond or something. So how can Dhaka, Bangladesh, which is a bigger city now than London was then, expect to do the same with, a 15-year loan? It doesn't make sense. So I think the world has to understand that there has to be this change in the financial ecosystem to allow for that kind of thing to happen in a place like Dhaka.
Now, in that sense, Camila, coming from the IFC, what is your message to city leaders who want to pursue green funding but don't know where to begin?
Definitely. I think, so IFC works with developing countries and in developing cities, right? And I think we've come to the notion that we need to help cities throughout this complexity in, let's say, a holistic manner, not just on the transaction, but pre and post of a specific transaction. So let me give you an example of the services and how we support cities. So we really try to come in early at the strategy setting stage when cities are thinking through how do I implement and craft a sustainability strategy. So we help them through that process, benchmark what is the city's ambition? How are other cities, subnational utilities doing it, right? Let's be ambitious, but also let's set credible targets and measurable targets. So we help them throughout that whole strategy process. Then we go in at the transaction level, which is when cities, for instance, decide, I'm going to go with a bond. Is a loan the preferred instrument? Is it better to have an investor base that is looking at a green, blue instrument, looking at the projects? Or do I want to go with a sustainability link? Because that's what I really want to, in a way, showcase to my investors, plus get the financial incentives. So we help them through then as a sustainability coordinator in each of those steps. Plus, of course, structuring the bond or loan or the transaction. But there's a lot of other steps in that process. And one that is very important is how do cities get sort of those second-party opinions that will really validate on an annual basis that their targets are being met, that they're transparent, measurable, and credible. And then lastly, all of this is tied to actual projects that need to happen for those targets to be achieved. So we really mobilize and leverage sort of technical support on the ground and pre-investment support to help them structure technically sound, bankable projects, right? If you're really leveraging commercial finance, and in a way support them through that project implementation. So that's a little bit of the one-stop shop, holistic approach that we follow.
Very well. And last but not least, Anta, next month, nearly 200 countries will convene for COP29. So what do you expect will be the role of green municipal finance in these talks?
Yeah, well, COP29 in Azerbaijan is been tagged the finance COP. So the questions about how we're going to raise the money that's required to meet the scale of the challenge and how we're going to do it quickly enough will be front and center. I don't think we expect that problem will be solved this year in Azerbaijan. And so we've concluded at Bloomberg Philanthropies that it's critical to enable all levels of government to act with the speed and scale that's required to combat the climate emergency. So that includes, of course, local leaders, but also regional heads, national governments, and the international system, ideally to align and work together. In that regard, we've supported for the first time, starting at the last COP, COP28, an initiative called CHAMP, the Coalition for High Ambition Multi-Level Partnerships, which has gotten 74 national governments to agree to better incorporate municipal action into their national climate targets and investment plans. I think that's just a start. We need to see how that's delivered and implemented on the ground, but it begins to move from a nationally determined climate contribution that might be a few lines on a sheet of paper to something that's more fulsome and incorporating the reality of where these projects hit the ground and benefit the lives of people who live in cities. We're actually also really pleased to announce today a partnership with Urban 20 to produce an event with the city of Rio in advance of the G20 in Brazil next month, again, in advance of COP, to bring the urban financing agenda more front and center. Now, G20 is a set of wealthy countries, as we all know, but we think the conversation needs to start there and then spread and begin to set the agenda for this COP29 in Baku, and then beyond, COP30 in Belém in Brazil. So we're pleased to engage at all levels, but I think it's taken a long time for the conversation to even get to this point, and then we need to utilize these global moments of U20, G20, COP, and then beyond to make the implementation real and to benefit people's lives.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for joining here. Thank you.
Próxima estación, Zócalo.
Well, 2023 had the highest record of migration across the U.S.-Mexico border in history. And I'd love each of you to share the current conditions and dynamics around migration in your cities right now. And Mayor Cuellar, let's start in Juárez.
Jen, thank you very much, Mayor Enríquez. Bueno, la migración es un problema mundial con consecuencias, muy fuertes consecuencias locales. Nosotros vivimos en la frontera las consecuencias de toda la migración y tenemos que estar lidiando con todo lo que deciden los gobiernos federales, tanto de Estados Unidos como de México. Lo que sí debo decir es que somos una comunidad muy unida. Somos dos países, México y Estados Unidos, 3 estados, Texas, Nuevo México, el estado de Chihuahua y 3 ciudades, pero estamos muy unidos. Entonces, hay una gran comunidad y estamos lidiando nosotros a través de albergues que tenemos en Ciudad Juárez para atender a los migrantes. Hemos recibido migrantes de 37 países del mundo.
Mayor Enríquez, in Las Cruces, how would you describe conditions?
Yeah, in Las Cruces, so we're in the state of New Mexico. We're roughly about 50 miles inland from the border, but our county does border Mexico, as Mayor Cuellar said. We're like united there, Mexico, Texas, and New Mexico. For us, we see minimal right now. I can share with you all that back in 2019, when we had the huge influx, it was a great learning experience for us there in the city of Las Cruces. And within 6 months, we had received 17,000 individuals seeking asylum. And it was all hands on deck for our community as well, our city, our county, our NGOs, our faith-based organizations, and all the members of the community that volunteered and came out to help. And we assisted with sheltering, we assisted with medication, food, and travel arrangements for these individuals. Today, we see less. There's some days we'll see 40, 50 a day coming through, and there's some days that 400 will come through. But we have learned from that, and we do have a faith-based organization that is handling that, where the city and county are on standby if any additional resources are needed.
Well, Mayor Cuellar, you've only been in office since January. Pardon me, Mayor Enriquez, you've been in office since January, and prior to that you were fire chief, and so you have some practical hands-on experience. What did you learn from your time as fire chief that you're applying now as mayor?
Well, a lot of that is answering the call, first of all. But, you know, that when I go back to 2019, I was the fire chief with the city of Las Cruces and was put in charge of the asylum refugee program. So collaborating, connecting with all the individuals, the agencies in our community, and especially El Paso, Texas, which we were helping each other, and they were the hub for the transportation. So all these things that we've learned of how to connect and how to collaborate and work together with issues has helped me.
Mayor Cuellar, how do you ascertain the needs of migrants, what they need, and how does your city work to try to provide that support for them?
Bueno, tenemos varios albergues. El gobierno municipal tiene un albergue y una de las cosas que el director de Derechos Humanos, que aquí anda Santiago, y hemos decidido en el gobierno es pensar en sus derechos. El migrante tiene derecho a la educación, tenemos una escuela en ese albergue, tiene derecho a la salud, tenemos atención médica en ese albergue, tiene derecho a la recreación, tenemos con el apoyo de algunas instituciones para que puedan practicar el deporte, derecho a la alimentación, por supuesto. Entonces es un tema de derechos. Lo que nosotros en el gobierno de Ciudad Juárez hemos visto es darles a ellos, simple y sencillamente, son seres humanos, derechos, y respetamos esos derechos. Así es como estamos atendiendo el problema en el albergue Kiki Romero, pero también en el albergue del gobierno mexicano, del gobierno federal, también se cuidan los derechos. Y Juárez es una ciudad muy generosa. Ya lo decía, hemos recibido migrantes de 37 países que buscan el sueño americano. Ellos llegan hasta Juárez, que es la frontera, y una vez que llegan ahí, pues lo que quieren es cruzar hacia Estados Unidos. Y buscamos darles seguridad y respetar sus derechos mientras están en Ciudad Juárez.
Mayor Enriquez, how are you ascertaining what migrants need and how your city can best support them?
Yeah, a lot of the same things as Mayor Cuellar stated is they're not held captive. So any resources that they may need, like whether it's shelter, whether it's food, whether it's treatment for illness or injuries, not holding them captive, they have a choice, but helping them with their travel arrangements is really primarily what they're looking for, and assisting them with those arrangements is what creates a good working relationship.
Now, as I said, you're newer to your role. You've been in office for about a year. Talk about the importance of relationship building between one another as mayors, and I'll start with you.
Oh, there's a lot. Like we said, we're united there in the area. It's great, and I appreciate Mayor Cuellar for connecting and inviting me to some of his events. I had the opportunity and the pleasure of seeing him have his Informe. It's basically the State of the City address that he held, and there's like 20,000 people. And yesterday in our innovation and our meeting yesterday with the mayors, we talked about being the voice. I can surely say that this man is the voice of Juárez, and it was great to see and to be a part of that and being engaged was great. So I look forward to the opportunities, whether the resources, economic development, immigration laws, and workforce, and those things. It's very important that we work together and have that collaboration.
And Mayor Cuellar, how important is it for you to have a partner on the U.S. side of the border who's also a mayor and doing the same work you're doing?
Bueno, primero agradecerle al Mayor Enríquez lo que ha dicho. Lo decía ahorita, es muy importante estar comunicados. Cuando uno escucha todos los discursos que se dan en torno a la migración, discursos que yo pienso tienen que ver también con elecciones y campañas, en la frontera vivimos otra realidad. Insisto, somos dos países, sí, pero somos una comunidad. Con el Mayor Enríquez tenemos una excelente relación, con el Mayor Lizard, que es el del Paso, Texas, también. Entonces, es curioso, uno escucha los discursos de odio, de ataque a los migrantes, de todos estos discursos que se dan en las campañas, pero en la frontera, al menos nosotros, en Las Cruces, Nuevo México, en Juárez, en El Paso, vivimos otra realidad. Estamos muy comunicados y buscamos siempre la manera de interactuar y de ayudarnos mutuamente. No siempre podemos, porque muchas de las decisiones son federales, no son de los gobiernos locales, pero siempre estamos comunicados. En temas de seguridad también estamos comunicados. Entonces, bueno, la pregunta es, ¿qué tan importante? Es muy importante, es mucho, muy importante. Y podemos, yo me siento orgulloso, no solamente de ser de Juárez, sino de ser esta comunidad. El cónsul de Estados Unidos en Juárez, Foley, le llama la comunidad Paso del Norte. Las Cruces, Nuevo México, El Paso, Texas y Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua, somos una comunidad que estamos integrada, que nos comunicamos, que nos coordinamos y que es completamente distinto al discurso que uno escucha en las campañas electorales.
Mayor Enriquez, you alluded to the economic relationship between your cities. And while we hear a lot about migration and immigration, help us better understand the economic bonds between your cities.
You know, like I said, and you mentioned, I'm fairly new in the position of mayor, but I grew up in the area, so I've seen the relationship that Juárez has had with El Paso, Texas, and for years with the workforce. And helping El Paso thrive with economic development, with the workforce that comes over with manufacturing and fabricating and things of that nature. And it's taken Las Cruces a little while longer. We're a smaller community, but now that we're getting the infrastructure in place, we can use that relationship and that help that has helped El Paso from Juárez that can help Las Cruces. And so being more of innovated and with technology that's taken place, it would really help us and the workforce. As he mentioned, there are some federal laws and regulations, and it makes it more challenging. But I can tell you in the city of Las Cruces, 60% of our population is Hispanic. So we mirror a lot of the culture. So the similarities make it more of an ease of a transition to work together, but we still have those challenges of the rules and regs that take place.
Mayor Cuellar, what would be helpful for national government to understand about the way your cities interact with one another as they're thinking about policies around migration and immigration?
Pues buscar que se nos escuche, el embajador de Estados Unidos en México, Ken Salazar, ha ido mucho a la frontera, eso nos ayuda, pero uno de mis sueños es que pudiéramos hacer una especie de plan binacional para el tema de migración, que juntos pudiéramos presentarle a Washington y a la Ciudad de México. Hay que trabajar unidos. Vuelvo a decirlo, es un problema internacional, es un problema mundial con profundos efectos locales. Por eso nosotros como Ciudad Juárez se acaba de adherir a la coalición de alcaldes de las Américas con el Emerson Institute y el Mayors Migration Council, porque tenemos claro que no es un problema solamente local. Entonces, ¿cómo nos ayudaría? Bueno, si nos escucharan, si pudiéramos presentar un plan conjunto de la región a los dos gobiernos. Las decisiones que toma el gobierno federal mexicano o el gobierno federal de Estados Unidos en el tema de migración tienen un impacto fuertísimo y somos nosotros los que lo tenemos que enfrentar. Al final de cuentas, cuando la gente llega a Ciudad Juárez para cruzar al Paso o a Las Cruces, ya están ahí, entonces tenemos que respetar sus derechos. Entonces, es un tema que se tiene que ver desde una perspectiva internacional y de ambos gobiernos.
Mayor Enriquez, same question for you.
Yeah, like Mary alluded, there is the federal laws that take place, but in our area there are some things that we would ask that if we could look at seeing how we could work together with the things that are needed in our area. You know, there are things, whether it's migration or whether it's visa, work permission, things like that could be expedited, would really be helpful. If we had a data center that developed and we didn't have the workforce, we could reach out to Juárez, Mexico, and see how we could get that permission that it wouldn't take years to accomplish. Those are the things that we would like to have working in our favor in our area.
You're both leading under unique pressures and heightened political scrutiny. What specific leadership tools are most helpful to you as you're working to govern effectively? Mayor?
Pues el tema de respetar los derechos, de ver la migración como un tema de derechos humanos. Todos venimos de alguna manera de migrantes de la migración. Y nosotros creo que algo que nos ha ayudado mucho es dos cosas fundamentales. Primero, que se respeten los derechos de los migrantes, pero también la otra que es muy importante es que todos tenemos que cumplir la ley. Y ese es un tema que a mí en algún momento me causó un poco de ruido políticamente, porque dije que algunos migrantes tenían que cumplir con la ley. Pero discriminar sería decir que unos sí pueden cumplir con la ley y otros no, o que unos sí tienen derechos y otros no. Entonces, los dos temas fundamentales es respetar los derechos de los migrantes, pero que también se entienda que todos tenemos que cumplir la ley, seamos o no seamos migrantes.
And Mayor Enriquez.
Yeah, as Mayor Cuellar has stated, doing the right thing. But as we talked yesterday and we met yesterday, trust is a huge component. Building the trust in the community, building the trust with the people in Juarez, that Mayor will lead, the people in Texas, in New Mexico, to gain their trust and to get the correct message out, as we learned yesterday, is very important and very crucial to what we're trying to do. We get so many people that think that we're giving more to others and to our own residents, and there's a lot of misinformation that goes out during that time when we're just assisting, and it's all brought back or reimbursed and whatever the case may be. But there's a lot of misinformation that goes out to the residents, and so we need to build that trust with everyone involved, and we have to send out the correct message for us.
10 years from now, what do you hope has changed?
Mayor integración, y algo que me faltó decir es unidad. Mantenernos en una comunidad unida como estamos ahora, con un mayor entendimiento de los gobiernos federales que volteen a ver la región no solo como un problema de migración, sino una región fronteriza que tiene un gran desarrollo económico. La comunidad fronteriza del Paso del Norte genera miles de millones de dólares en economía para los dos países.
Mayor Enriquez.
Well, this is my first time in Mexico City, and it's beautiful, and I've visited Juarez many a times, and the big difference is the financial capital that Mexico City is, and Juarez, like Las Cruces, New Mexico, and Texas, we're more of the agriculture, we're more of the warehouses. What I'd like to see in 10 years is a little bit of Mexico City in our area. He has 1.5 million people in population, and I think it's very doable if we all work together and we beautify and enhance the culture that we have in our area.
Mayor Enriquez, Mayor Cuellar, thank you.
Okay. Foreign Minister, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Natalie. It's my pleasure.
I don't know if everybody here knows, but before this most recent posting, you already had a very long resume. You are a trained psychiatrist, an academic, a diplomat, the author of more than a dozen books. You've served in numerous leadership positions in Mexico, from permanent representative of Mexico to the United Nations to Mexico's Minister of Health. And you mentioned this to me yesterday, you helped found the Aspen Institute of Mexico.
Yes.
And now you've just been ratified Secretary of Foreign Affairs under President Claudia Sheinbaum. So tell us what challenges this new role presents.
Well, first of all, let me tell you that it is for me a distinct privilege to serve for the first female president of Mexico. So I am very honored because she's also a scientist and is someone that has an extraordinary leadership, and she's made already very clear what her priorities are in foreign policy for Mexico. And of course, we will follow very strictly our constitutional principles of foreign policy, which basically are the principle of self-determination, non-intervention, and human rights, very much on the same line as the UN Charter and the universally accepted principles. So we will follow that, and of course the international landscape is extremely complicated these days. I mean, we can go from the re-emerging of conflicts in many, many parts of the world, the armed races, and certainly the tensions, geopolitical tensions, trade tensions, and then we have these global threats to humanity, such as global change, that we need to address. So it is really a wide set of complicated elements that we will need to address with the help of our friends, of our partners, because Mexico is also part of the North American bloc, and at the same time, we belong to Latin America and the Caribbean as a region. So we have this opportunity of our geopolitical situation, which also has, of course, a lot of responsibilities. So I think most of it, Natalie, despite the complexity and being fully aware of what the responsibilities are, I think we have a great opportunity because we have a great president, and I think the years ahead are going to be good for Mexico and are going to be good for our partners, both north and south of our borders.
Can you talk to us a little bit about how the Sheinbaum administration views Mexico's role on the global stage and what your priorities as foreign minister are?
Well, the Sheinbaum administration, let me say, we're entering the second stage of a deep transformation in Mexico, a political transformation, an economic transformation, a social transformation, the so-called Cuarta Transformación. This is the second stage of this transformation of Mexico, which has already brought a number of very clear advantages. Just to mention a few, 9.5 million moved out of poverty during the last few years. And our economy is an economy that is healthy and it's very attractive. Just this morning, we had this huge dialogue with the CEOs from the most important, or some of the most important companies of the United States, and direct investments were committed for over $20 billion for next year. So that gives you an idea of what kind of country we have at this time in Mexico. And of course, President Sheinbaum has advised us very clearly what should be our main objectives. And we need to make an effort to bring together the international politics and the policies of Mexico with the internal needs of Mexico. And of course, we need to keep growing in terms of our economy, but it has to be an economy with a clear social commitment. Moral economy is the way she is referred to our economy. So we hope that these opportunities, nearshoring, taking advantage of belonging to one of the most powerful and dynamic markets in the world, will bring also prosperity, shared prosperity, la prosperidad compartida, which is the main purpose of all these efforts. Because at the end, yes, it is important nearshoring, it is important direct investments, but what for? It is important to bring better conditions of living to the people of Mexico, and in the case of North America, of the United States and Canada as well.
I want to talk a little bit about the relationship with the U.S. Mexico is the largest trading partner of the United States, surpassed China. What is your view on cross-border collaboration, on the range of challenges that the two countries confront, from fentanyl to migration?
Again, it is it's a complex relationship, but I think the positive sides of it overcome the others that are complex, but not necessarily unable to be addressed more effectively. Let me just come back a little bit to the trade relationship that we have now with the United States and with Canada, because North America represents 5% of the global population, the three countries. But the three countries represent 30% of global trade. So I think here we have a very strong, a very powerful relationship that we need to take fully advantage of it. Migration or as we prefer to call it now, human mobility. It is a challenge. We cannot see migration as a problem because then we would never have a solution. So we have to see migration as a global phenomenon that is also growing in our region, and what we need is a better way to administer it. We need to make migration regular. We need to take very clear responsibility for the human rights of migrants. Migrants are not criminals. Migrants represent a very powerful and productive force. Just take a look at what migrants are doing in the United States with their contribution to the U.S. GDP. Migrants that represent now at least 8% of, and I'm talking about Mexican migrants, 8% of U.S. GDP. 82% of their income remains in the United States, and only 18% is sent back to Mexico. So I think we need to change, to begin with, our conception and our perception about migrants and migration. Not a problem, a phenomenon. Therefore, it's not something that is going to have a solution, but it needs to have a much better administration. These are human beings, need to be treated as such, and we need to provide them with opportunities because they've shown in many parts of the world, including our region, that they can represent a very important and productive component of society.
We only have a very short amount of time left. How do you see the role, this is a cities conference, how do you see the role of cities globally in your work in the foreign policy of Mexico to address the many issues that the country has to address?
Natalie, at least 54% of the world population lives in cities. I think cities represent, again, a great opportunity from the global perspective. Do we want to do better in the 2030 agenda? Do we want to do better advancing in all the goals that were set on that agenda? We need the cities to be not only part of it, we need the cities to lead us in order to achieve those goals of the 2030 agenda. Mexico City, under the leadership, by the way, of President Sheinbaum, did enormous contributions to connectivity to begin with. And Mexico City was, at least a few years ago, I don't know if it remains, the best interconnected city in the world with over 30,000 free points of connectivity so that everyone in Mexico City is really connected. But cities are also so important. Let's look briefly at border cities. If we need to take advantage, if we really want to take advantage of nearshoring, we need to work with our border cities. They are absolutely crucial if we want to really advance in the whole chain that will be necessary for nearshoring to become a reality. And nearshoring is a great opportunity. Cities must be in the front line for nearshoring in Mexico and North America in the following years. I see no other option than working very much closer with cities in order to achieve these very legitimate and viable goals. We need to work with the cities.
Secretario, thank you so much.
Natalie, muchas gracias. Gracias a todos. Thank you very much.